I'm sorry, this should be illegal. Send Sarah J. Maas straight to jail. Why would you write this? Straight to jail. Jail time. Lock her up. Hi, welcome. It is the final book in the Throne of Glass series. It is Kingdom of Ash time. This is bittersweet and, like, honestly, really sad. Am I gonna sob during this book? And during this, well, I'm definitely gonna sob during the book. I've already sobbed during the book. I'm probably gonna sob at points during this presentation. Probably not in this first video. I don't think this first video is gonna get to anything that's gonna make me sob. Children. Oh my god. We're never gonna get to this book alive. I'm so excited. I love this book series so much, and Kingdom of Ash is one of the reasons why. I feel like Sarah J. Maas knows how to wrap a series up exceptionally well. Should we start for real now? Are you guys ready? Are you prepared? Let's get ready. We're going to do a quick recap of where everyone is at first, and then we will go ahead and jump into the actual meat of Kingdom of Ash. Okay. So our first group that we're going to chat about is our Tower of Dawn folks, and they are now headed for the northern continent. Yes. Our Tower of Dawn girlies, which is Mr. and Mrs. Yrene Towers. That's right, Chaol got married. Nezrin, Sartak, the heir to the southern continent, and a bunch of healers are headed with the Armada, the Crochans Armada, and an aerial legion of Rookin, as well as a pretty large group of healers. They are headed, and I think also a pretty large land army are headed north to Terrasen to give their support to Aelin's cause. And they're also armed with some very important info. In Tower of Dawn, we found out that Maeve is actually a Valg queen, and she fled the 3 Valg kings. And we know that the Valg Kings are coming actually they originally came to take her back to Valgland, and that still might be one of their main focuses. Although they also love destroying things. We can't trust them. We also found out in the Tower of Dawn series, in Tower of Dawn, that the healer's magic from the southern continent works very well against the Valg. In fact, it was kind of created with the Valg in mind, and so now they can heal people that are possessed with the Valg, is the long and short of it. Then we have Miss Aelin Ashryver Whitethorn Galathinius, because we did find out at the end of Empire of Storms that she's married to Rowan. Unfortunately, she's not leaving her wedding in as happy of a place as Chaol and Yrene. She was captured by Maeve and is currently being held and brutally tortured and kept in an iron mask. It's horrifying. It's truly horrifying and makes me nauseous to think about. We get to spend some time with Aelin. Yeah, she's being tortured in this video, and it's a bad time every time. And she does not think anyone's coming to rescue her. She really set things up so that they didn't need her anymore. It's kind of how she feels. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. She doesn't think anyone's coming to get her. And even if they do come to get her, she knows that the only way to forge the lock and put the keys back in is to sacrifice herself. That she was essentially born to sacrifice herself. Okay, great. She's truly having the worst of times. Truly the worst of times. If you think of a bad time, Aelin's having the worst time. She's with, like I said, Maeve, and then Maeve's, the guy that's torturing her, his name is Karn, and he is her torturer. And then Fenris is actually the only one from Empire of Storms that remained with Maeve. Rowan, Gavriel, and Lorcan, who we'll talk about in just a second here, their blood oaths have all been severed. Rowan obviously pledged himself to Aelin, and then Lorcan and Gavriel's blood oaths were severed at the end of Empire of Storm. Which brings us to our rescue squad. So rescue squad is Rowan, Lorcan, Gavriel, and Lead. Lorcan and Gavriel's blood oath severing almost killed them, but they're fine now, and they've decided to help Rowan hunt down Maeve and Aelin, therefore. And the reason Lorcan is doing this is because it's sort of Lorcan's fault that Aelin got captured by Maeve. Would have Maeve found another way to get her? Maybe. But it's partially his fault because he called up Maeve and he said, "Hi Maeve, I'm scared, will you come pick me up?" When he had Aelin, because he was scared that Aelin was going to get hurt. Aelin is really mad at him. She has not is so mad at this man for causing Aelin, her queen, to get captured by Maeve. So they had hecka romancy vibes back in Empire of Storm, but now Aelin does not want to have anything to do with Lorcan. Lorcan obviously is still obsessed with her. Then we have what I'm calling 13.5, as in 13 and a half, because Dorian has kind of teamed up with the witches. When everyone kind of split up with Empire of Storm, Dorian said, "I'm actually good with the witches." Why, you might ask? Well, because Dorian has a crush on Manon. Also, he has kind of like realized that if Aelin is gone, which currently she is, he might need to be the one to sacrifice himself, because they both are like descendants of like the Ashryver Galathinius line way back in the distant past. And so he might need to sacrifice himself to bind the keys in the lock, since Aelin is, you know, sort of busy. So Dorian and the 13 have kind of two missions they are working on. They are, one, looking for the third and final word key to kind of like complete that whole situation. And two, Manon in particular, but also all the witches, are looking for the Crochan witches, because Manon is both a Crochan queen and a Blackbeak like princess. Like, she is essentially the like witch queen of all the witches. And so she wants to find the Crochans to see if she can convince them to become allies in this war on Aelin's side, obviously. And then our last group is what I'm calling the troops, which is kind of like our main war effort. And so we have Aedion and Lysandra, and Lysandra is currently pretending to be Aelin using her shapeshifter abilities. When it's Lysandra Aelin, she'll be in this like green suit. We've changed her. She's green because Aelin asked her. Aelin knew she was gonna have to sacrifice herself. She like figured this out before anyone else knew, and she put a contingency plan in place and knows that Terrasen like needs a queen. That right now, like besides Aelin, there's like no one who's like a direct descendant of the Galathinius line to carry on Terrasen's throne, and so she needs a queen. And so she asked Lysandra to do that. And so Lysandra is pretending to be Aelin in her stead, which works pretty well. Lysandra is pretty good at pretending to be Aelin, except she does not have any of the fire magic that Aelin has. It also is one of the most brave, noble things that we see happen in this book. Lysandra is essentially sacrificing her entire life, or the possibility of her entire life, in order to like play this role of Aelin. Lysandra up until this point has been a courtesan, and her life, she was literally owned by the I forget her name, but like the worst lady alive. She was like literally owned by her, and as soon as she got freedom from her, she has pledged her life. She is not indebted to Aelin in any way, but has chosen to like sacrifice her life so that Terrasen might have a ruler. For some reason, Mr. Aedion Ashryver is so angry about this, like cannot get over himself about this. He's being so mean about it. I like really don't want to spend a lot of time talking about him, because it frustrates me to no end that he is so mean about this. But he like feels like betrayed by the fact that they like didn't plan this with him. I don't know. We'll talk more about this later because it comes up a few times, but like Aedion is getting on my last nerves in this book. And then we have the allies that they have, that Aelin essentially got for them. So we have Ansel, who was Aelin's roommate from the Red Desert, who has become the queen of Briargate, and then also took over Melisande and is leading Melisandre's troops. And then we also have Ilias, the Red Desert assassin, the son of the Red Desert assassin, who has brought the assassins with him. And so we have a force of assassins. And then we also have Prince Aelin Ashryver, who has pledged the entire Ashryver fleet to assist Aelin. So we have kind of a lot of support there. And we also have the Bane, which is like Aedion's troops from Terrasen. So a lot of troops there. They will be fighting battles and things and doing war. Okay, before we actually jump into the book, we get a couple of baby little chapters. This first one is called The Prince, and it is from Rowan's point of view. I'm actually just gonna like read you a little excerpt from it. It's not a very long section. He had been hunting for her since the moment she was taken from him, his mate. He barely remembered even his own name, and sometimes he spoke along the bond between them, sending his soul on the wind to wherever she was held captive, entombed. I will find you. Then we also get a little baby chapter from Aelin. It's a bad time. An Aelin check-in. Aelin's in an iron box that smothers her magic, but she can hear the sound of running water around her. She's kind of lost sense of time, sense of self. She does not know how long she's been here. They're trying to torture information out of her, but she like refuses to break. And she is just feeling so hopeless, but like knows she has to like hold on for Terrasen. And she believes that even like the gods who had been kind of like guiding her along this path so she could sacrifice herself, like even they have abandoned her at this point. Like she is all alone in this terrible, terrible situation. But she still told herself the story. Still sometimes imagined that that river sang it to her. That the darkness living within that sealed coffin sang it to her as well. Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom. And we already cried, and this is going to be the first one on the cry count. We're not even into chapter 1 yet. But like, oh, this will get me. This will get me every time. Words she has spoken to a prince once long ago. This is how she like told the story to Rowan back in Airfire, where she like told the whole story of how she got to where she was. And it was like the first time she like told the story in its entirety to anyone. A prince of ice and wind, a prince who had been hers, and she his, long before the bond between their souls became known to them. It was upon him that the task of protecting that once glorious kingdom now fell. The prince whose scent was kissed with pine and snow, the scent of that kingdom she had loved with her heart of wildfire. Even when the Dark Queen presided over the hunter's ministrations, the princess thought of him, held onto his memory as if it were a rock in the raging river. But Maeve tries to use like memories of Rowan against her, and for Aelin, the line between like the truth and lies becomes really blurry. Maeve can get in your mind and like can give you false memories, and so she doesn't. It is hard for Aelin to decipher like what really happened and what is this false memory. So she told herself the story. The darkness and the flame deep within her whispered it back too. And she sang it back to them, locked in that coffin, hidden on an island within the heart of a river. The princess recited the story over and over and over, and let them unleash an eternity of pain upon her body. Once upon a time, in a land long since burned to ash, there lived a young princess who loved her kingdom. Let's actually jump into the main plot. Now that we know that Rowan and Aelin are equally having bad times. I mean, Aelin's time might be worse. Rowan is feeling that though. Rowan, the guilt at which Rowan is feeling, we'll talk about it as we get to more Rowan chapters in this, that he has not yet rescued Aelin, pretty immense. So we're going to start with Aedion and the troops. This is where they're at. This like green guy is Aedion and the troops. They left away. They were like down south and they sailed all the way up the coast and then inland to Orinth up the river. But they're going to kind of sail a lot of those boats back down the coast to kind of like patrol out there. They have like a pretty large armada at this point. Well, maybe not large, but like they have a pretty decent armada at this point between some of Rolf's men and the Ashryver armada. So, and also they have the Whitethorn. But Aedion is inland in troops with the Bane, with his like group of Terrasen men. And he's kind of like chilling. They're chilling in like the mountains of northern Terrasen right now because that's where the Bane was. We learned that it's been 2 months since the end of Empire of Storms. It took a month for them to make that sail up the coast and another 2 weeks to move inland. And there have been no battles. There have been a couple skirmishes as they've like encountered Valg, but just like very, very small groups. There have been no battles. They kind of don't know what Erewhon's plan is next. Lysandra has kind of kept up the ruse of being Aelin for the most part, but today they like sent fake Aelin on an errand, like a pretend errand. They're like, Aelin had to go to the coast for a few days, so Lysandra could accompany Aedion and Galen to do some scouting in her snowlopper form. Aedion is being, again, let me remind you, Aedion is being the literal worst. And like will not talk to Lysandra, moving along with like the ruse of the fact that Aelin is Aelin, and so like he doesn't do anything to make people think that like Aelin is not who she says she is, or like add tensions there. But when they're in private, like they're literally not speaking to each other. I like cannot even stand it, and we find out that like Lysandra, no matter what form she takes, her brand from being a courtesan is still always on her. And Aedion is like, this is so annoying that you didn't even tell me. And I like want to say, I think Aedion would be justified a little bit more if they hadn't told him as this act was going on. Like if Lysandra and him, because Aedion becomes involved because if Aelin never returns, Lysandra is to carry on this ruse for literally the rest of her life, and she needs to pop out the babies. And in order for them to look like Aelin, Lysandra and Aedion are going to, or Aedion's going to get Lysandra pregnant because Aedion looks just like Aelin. I don't know. The math on this is not mathing because these babies will now look nothing like Rowan. But like, that's neither here nor there. If they did that in secret, if like Lysandra got pregnant and then was like, this is actually going to be Aelin's baby, I think that would be like justified for being this mad. Even if maybe they hadn't done the pregnancy thing, but like this whole time, Aedion didn't know that Lysandra was actually Lysandra and like thought she was Aelin. Like if they kept him in the dark about that, again, I think he'd be justified. They just did this plan without him because this plan really didn't involve him very strongly. Okay, they just did the planning. Before the plan took into effect, Aedion found out. So like I don't know why he has his panties in such a twist. Like, sorry you didn't get included on the planning. You're kind of annoying and not. It was a plan for the girlies. Okay, it was girly planning time and you were not invited. Anyway, I'm like very fed up with Aedion. I feel like I don't need to like do too much to work on PR for Chaol. Like, if you don't like Chaol after Tower of Dawn, I don't know. I can't help you. Like, it's too late for y'all. I guess that's your loss. But, like, Aedion, I shan't be helping. If you think I'm going to be switching to Team Aedion PR, no, sir. So Galen and Aedion are out on the scouting mission because they heard word of Valg in the area, and Aedion thinks that Erewhon is probably going to descend on Terrasen soon. They're kind of at the cusp of like fall into winter, and it becomes very treacherous because most of Terrasen is very mountainous, so it becomes a very treacherous time to move large masses of like troops around. And so Darrow and the lords are like, no, he's clearly gonna wait for spring. Like, that's the most logical choice. And Aedion is like, I don't know if Erewhon is so worried about that. Like, Erewhon is not going to be worried about the loss of life of, like, people starving and freezing to death. That's just, like, not going to be a concern for him. So anyway, today they're on a scouting mission to, one, kind of check out the Valg situation that they've heard rumors about, and also to kind of see what it would look like for them to move these troops further south and, like, prepare for Erewhon's approaching army. Ren is also there. I don't know why he didn't get put on the last side, but Ren is also there. He is on Team Aedion. He is working with Aedion as a strong ally, and they do come across a group of 6 Valg as per the information they received from the scouts. And Aedion gives word to bring one back alive because, you know, we're gonna interrogate them, see if we can get some information out of them. But the other 5, and they're able to like take care of that pretty quickly. They've gotten pretty good at killing like the Valg footmen because they've had practice. After that, they all head back to the Allsbrook Castle, which is Ren's family's castle, and they are still discussing what they think Erewhon might be up to. And Ren also thinks it might be too dangerous to like bring the troops through the mountains. He thinks, okay, well, even if Erewhon is coming like soon, I think he'll probably go for the coast because the coast is, you know, much less snowy and much less dangerous and treacherous to bring the troops up. And Aedion's like, I don't know. I feel like Erewhon is very unpredictable, and I don't think we can base what we think the best like military strategy is moving forward. I don't think we can definitely rely on that as being Erewhon's move. Erewhon is a sneaky dude. He might do something really unexpected. And we learned that they also haven't heard any updates from Manon or Dorian about like how the hunt for the 3rd word key is going, or the witches. Like, they haven't heard anything from them. They also haven't heard anything from Rowan and the gang. Everyone is kind of like pretty isolated right now. They don't know what the other crews are up to. But Aedion is thinking to himself, like, or I think he says this out loud, like, why would they send, like, men to scout, like, Valg foot soldiers, as we saw, to scout this area when they could just use witches in the air? Like, that would be much less dangerous. Like, this is kind of strange. And Ren's like, I don't know. And we also come to find out that the tensions between Ren and Aelin, fake Aelin, are pretty high. Ren was very upset with Aelin when Aelin like relented and left Terrasen at the beginning of Empire of Storms. She left Terrasen to go like gather allies and money. But Ren felt like she was abandoning Terrasen yet again. My notes say literally death to all men. Aedion and Ren, I don't want to hear it from you. You guys have literally, I know, Aedion has had a hard life, okay? I saw a TikTok recently that, like, reminded me. They were like, remember, Aedion is also, like, a good guy. Remember back in Queen of Shadows when he was literally trying to, like, off himself because he didn't even risk the chance of Aelin, a girl he hadn't seen in over a decade, coming to rescue him. And so he was trying to off himself before he got executed. And I was like, that is true. He does love Aelin and his country very, very much. He just, like, does not... He, like, thinks he's the smartest person in the room every single time. And he's just not. Like, if he just, like, learned that, if he was just like, you know what? Sometimes the girlies I'm surrounded by are smarter than me, and I should trust their instincts and intuition, all his problems would go away. Because I do think he has a good heart. His heart is in the right place. He just thinks he's smarter than everyone else. And he just, like, truly is not. And I don't know what Ren's deal is. That's really not my problem. And Ren's like, okay, so what do we do? So we know, we, like, suspect Valg are coming. Like, do we send some troops to the mountains and, like, some down the coast? Like, do we split them up? Like, what do we do there? And Aedion's like, we don't have a large enough, like, foot soldiers. Like, the Bane is not large enough to split and send some this way and some this way. Like, that, if we split them up, they will get destroyed. Like, honestly, the amount of men we have currently is probably not even enough to face off with Erewhon's troops as it stands. If we like meet them head on, everybody versus everybody. So like we definitely shouldn't split up. And then Ren's like, Aelin doesn't seem too concerned about this. And Aedion like flashes back to that iron coffin on the beach and how like Aelin has sacrificed everything for this country, and he's like kind of getting annoyed with Ren too. He's hearing Ren and he says, this sounds annoying. Can he hear himself and hear that it sounds annoying? No, but he does hear Ren and he says, oh, let's not talk about Aelin that way. She's literally sacrificing everything. He says to Ren, Aelin has plans that she will tell us about when the time is right. Everything she does is for Terrasen. He's like thinking to himself about how he's like still trying to forgive himself for all the grief he gave Aelin last book. He was always like, Aelin, where are our allies? And like Aelin had a plan the whole time and now she's being brutally tortured. And I hope he never forgives himself, to be honest. Normally I'm like, forgive yourself. Live, learn, love, move forward. I hope that moment haunts your nightmares every single night for the rest of your life. I hope you are 87 years old and you still think, wow, that was not a great move. Because I don't know if we should forgive ourselves without like looking internally, processing, and trying to figure out how we become better. Because he's been put in a very similar situation with Lysandra. And he is, once again, being the worst about it. So, like, let's not forgive ourselves until we've at least made ourselves better. But honestly, you might deserve that guilt for the rest of your life. And then Ren continues to be mean about Aelin, and particularly mean about Aelin leaving Terrasen when she was a child, an 8-year-old. And it makes me violently angry. Violently angry. I don't know if you've encountered an 8-year-old in your life. If you haven't, I don't know, go look at recess therapy. They have like actual children, and you'll be like, oh, an 8-year-old is a tiny child. Like, that's a kid. She woke up in bed in between her brutally murdered parents and then got rushed down a freezing river, got sent to live with the worst man alive, and is now back and laying down her literal life to save the world. And I just like do not have time for you. I do not have time for you. I hope something heavy falls on your head. And then we get to see a cutie little moment where Lysandra and Evangeline come in. Evangeline has been staying at the Allsbrook Castle with Murtagh, and sometimes Ren, but mostly Murtagh. And we get the update that she and Fleetfoot are doing well. Like, Murtagh really loves the dog, and honestly, loves Evangeline too. She's cutie. And Evangeline goes on to explain how Murtagh took her to Caravere, which is the land that Lysandra has been like gifted. So Lysandra is officially like a land-owning lady in Terrasen, according to Aelin, and Evangeline was able to go and visit this land, and she talks about how it's like so beautiful, and she talks about her plans for like building this garden and how Murtagh was like, yeah, and she's talking about everything that she's gonna plant there. And for a heartbeat, Aedion couldn't endure the emotion on Lysandra's face as Evangeline prattled off about her grand plans for the estate. The pain of longing for life that would likely be snatched away before she had a chance to claim it. Oh my god. We're never gonna get to this book alive. Aedion, how can you see this and be like, I think the best move going forward is still to be a about this? Like, what? I get it, okay, Sarah? Part of the reason he's being so terrible about this is because he knows that Lysandra is sacrificing and he doesn't want her to. I don't care. Be nice to her. Be nice to her, or I will come into this book and I will punch you square in the nose. Evangeline and Lysandra like go off, and Evangeline is like so excited to see her. Like Lysandra's like a mom to Evangeline. It's this like adoptive mother, and they've been separated for months at this point, and so to be reunited is just like such an exciting moment. The next morning at breakfast, they receive word that Erewhon has completely destroyed the coastal city of Killian. Completely like leveled it, razed it to the ground, and in the process also took out 10 of Wendellin's warships. And we know that if they're just like left to their own devices, they will be up the river to Orinth in about a week. And Ren says we have to return to camp, see if we can get our fleet back down the Florian and strike with Rolf from the sea while we hammer from the land. But we haven't seen Rolf actually since Empire of Storms. He is supposed to be off looking for the Mycenaeans, but like we don't know where he is. And like we've always been a little suspicious of Rolf because like, pirate vibes. And so they're like, well, maybe, I mean, he would be super helpful if he showed back up, but like we cannot count on him showing back up. He might just like have vanished into the sunset. But then Aedion thinks of the promise he made to Rowan. He has to hold the line. He cannot let Erewhon gain any more ground while they wait for Aelin. And then Aedion turns to Lysandra and says, how many can your wyvern form carry? So they're going to take Lysandra in wyvern form and fly back to camp. Except if I was Lysandra, I would say, oh, unfortunately your big giant head can't fit. I cannot carry your big giant stupid head. So it can fit everyone else, but like you and your big giant stupid head, not invited. You're going to have to walk, I guess. We'll get back to them in a second. Let's check in with the rescue crew. The rescue crew is like currently on a city off the map. They are in like an ancient city that we're told is south of Dorian. So I think it is like on one of the islands that is not on this map. But they've been all over looking for Aelin. And Aelin has really kind of like formed a friendship with Gabrielle over their time together. Gabrielle just kind of like makes sure she is cared for because Girly is not speaking to Lorcan. Unlike Aedion, she's justified in this because Lorcan was a big dumb stupid head and caused a lot of problems. So Lorcan mostly just like lurks about in the background because he's still deeply madly in love with Aelin, and so he wants to keep an eye on her, make sure she's safe and sound, but like Aelin literally doesn't want to have anything to do with the man. Meanwhile, Gabrielle is like making sure she like is warm and gets food because she's like so much more fragile than like the fae men she's traveling with, and like she is such a good sport. But like Gabrielle like makes sure she's taken care of. He uses his magic to like brace her ankle. He's like taught her how to ride a horse. Like they've become close buddies. Right now they're like sharing an apple as a snack, and it's very cute. And Aelin thinks to herself, every time she looked at Lorcan, she just saw him crawling towards Maeve. And honestly, that's the biggest ick anyone could have. Ew, a boy crawling on the ground towards your mortal enemy? Red flag. I mean, is Lorcan only composed of red flags? Yeah. What's a girl gonna do? He's 6'7" or something. She can't see the red flags. They're so far away up there. They're running out of money. They've been initially they followed this like faint tug on the mating bond between Rowan and Aelin, but that mating has been like shut down since pretty much that day on the beach, and they have had no real sign of Maeve. And Aelin is also no longer receiving nudges from the goddess that used to nudge her Anith. She like still feels vaguely their presence, but is also kind of annoyed with them because she knows now that the gods were essentially just using them for their own schemes and really did not have their best interest in heart. And she's still like kind of dwelling on the fact that once they rescue Aelin, they're going to be expecting her to then just like sacrifice herself. And it does make her nauseous. It makes her sick to her stomach because how can you not? So currently their plan is, and how they like have been moving from location to location and deciding where to look for Aelin next, is that they've been finding fae soldiers in all of these countries and cities and like beating them up for information about like where Maeve might be and where she might be holding Aelin. So currently Rowan is inside this building grabbing some fae soldiers, and he's gonna beat him up. When Rowan emerges from the building, he has 2 fae soldiers with him. They can't track Maeve, but they have been able to locate her commanders all over the continent. And Rowan is like feral. Like, I cannot emphasize to you enough how like, you know, unhinged Rowan is. And he is like, here's how this is gonna go. I'll break your legs and your spine. That will heal. But then he points over to Lorcan. What he will do to you, you won't recover from. And Alita's like, the first time this happened, I like could not look. The violence was like too much for me. But today a little voice inside of her urges her to watch. And Gabrielle's like, look guys, just like give Rowan the information he needs and we'll leave you alone. He's like the good cop in this situation. But the first commander is like, Maeve is going to kill every last one of you and your traitor soldiers. And Rowan says she can try. And then he rips the guy up into little bitty pieces. Okay, another Aelin check-in. Who's excited? She is like dreaming. She's having this dream, and around her the staghorns, the mountains of Terrasen, are burning, and Oakwald, the like sacred holy forest where the little folks live, is burning with it. The world was bathed in fire. Fire, not darkness. And Aelin thinks to herself, you did this. You did this. You did this. And then she looks and she sees the Lord of the North, this like white stag, and it is standing right along the flames, and he is trapped and he's like screaming, and Aelin is trying to get to him, but she can't get over to him. And as soon as she gets close enough, instead of like coming to Aelin to like save himself, he like throws himself into the wall of flames. Aelin wakes up and the white wolf, Fenris, is watching her. She's covered in iron chains, but she hasn't been put back in her iron coffin. And again, she's like literally no sense of time, so she doesn't know how long it's been since she was last brutally tortured, but like she's not back in the coffin, so like they might be getting her again. She has no idea where she is, and she thinks about how she learned how to escape like any chains when she was in assassin training school. Like this was part of her training, but these chains were created just for her, and they were created with that in mind. So there's just like no way for her to escape from them. Fenris, on the other hand, is not bound with chains. He is bound by this blood oath because he is still completely under Maeve's control. Aelin is like coming back in her body, and she realizes she's not in pain anymore, and the pain itself, she's not sure if it was real. She doesn't know if she was actually like tortured and if something terrible and painful actually happened to her, or if that was just like dreams that were implanted inside of her mind. And that is like quite disorienting, obviously. And then she looks over at the wolf. The wolf blinked at her thrice. In the early days, months, years of this, they had crafted a silent code between them. Using the few moments she'd been able to dredge up speech, whispering through near invisible holes in the iron coffin. 1 blink for yes, 2 for no, 3 for are you all right, 4 for I am here, I am with you, 5 for this is real, you are awake. Fenris blinked again 3 times. Are you all right? Aelin swallowed against the thickness in her throat, her tongue peeling off the roof of her mouth. She blinked once. Yes. She counted his blinks. 6. He'd made that one up. Liar, or something like it. She'd refused to acknowledge that particular code. She blinked once again. Yes. And then we learn that Aelin, this is pretty typical. Often when she wakes, or normally when she wakes up, she has no injuries, no pain, only the memory of it. And she can remember Karn just slicing her up, and sometimes it is not true, and sometimes it's a memory that Maeve has planted in her mind, and sometimes it is real and they just have healed her up before she wakes up. But she knows if she was left on this altar, the stone altar where she's chained up right now, that he probably means to return soon. And she's pulling on the chains, trying to figure out some way to get out of them. But then she sees Fenris kind of straighten up and twitch his ears, and she knows that Karn is on his way back, and she begins to shake. She cannot hold herself back from literally shaking because she's so kind of frightened and just worn down from everything that has happened to her. And Karn walks in, and this man is evil for no reason. This man is evil for literally no reason. Maeve, as we talked about in Tower of Dawn, Maeve has a reason. Maeve is truly evil in ways that she doesn't need to be, but I kind of get that she was hecka bored and wanted to leave the Valglands. Okay, I don't begrudge her that. Do we have to torture everyone when she got here? Debatable, but I kind of get Maeve. This man is just evil for fun. I don't really love that. I do hate him in my bones. He says to her, awake so soon. I must not have worked you hard enough, so eager for more. And we learned that everything that Aelin is being fed while she's here is laced with iron. Originally, when she was here for the first few days, weeks, she doesn't know, she tried to just not eat, to reject all the food, but she had grown so weak from not eating that eventually she had to give in, and now she's eating this iron-laced food that is just hurting her and suppressing her magic from the inside out. We learn that also Karn has been given control over Fenris, and that he's in charge of when Fenris gets to eat and when he gets to drink and when he gets to use the bathroom. And Aelin recounts that sometimes she can hear Fenris crying because Karn forgot to let him go and use the bathroom, or forgets to feed him and just is neglecting him. Okay. Great. Then Karen says to her, how shall we play tonight, Aelin? Her lips curled back from her teeth. Such rage, even now. She would never let go of it, the rage. Even when she sank into that burning sea within her. Even when she sang to the darkness and flames, the rage guided her. And then Karn goes to get started, and he reminds her, he says, this could all be over the moment you swear the blood oath to Maeve. If you swear the blood oath to Maeve, done. Torturing done. You live in a life of luxury. It'll be so fun, so cute, so fresh. And then obviously, Aelin is no. And then Karn points to the mate marking on Aelin's neck and says, if it wasn't for Maeve's gag order, I'd put my own teeth in you. See if Whitethorn's marking holds up then. I'm literally sick. Ugh. Aelin braced herself, took plunging breaths that would bring her far away from here, from her body. She'd never let them break her, never swear that blood oath for Terrasen, for her people whom she had left to endure their own torment for 10 long years. She owed them this much. Deep, deep, deep she went, as if she could outrun what was to come, as if she could hide from it. The hammer glinted in the firelight as it rose over her knee, Karn's breath sucking in, anticipation and delight mingling on his face. Fenris blinked, over and over and over. I am here, I am with you. It didn't stop the hammer from falling, or the scream that shuddered from her throat. Witch check-in. Let's go check on our witches. So the witches and Dorian have spent the last several months trying to hunt down the Crochans. They just keep coming across abandoned camps. They're close, but they just can't seem to track them down. Initially, they had gone hunting for the 3rd word key, but they weren't really able to make much progress on it, so they switched to this hunt for the Crochans. And Dorian's focus is really less on the Crochans and more on flirting with Manon. Just kidding. His focus is the word keys, we are told. But I suspect Manon flirting is a very, very, very close second. When we see them in this moment, Dorian is in the back doing magic to entertain the girlies. He's putting on little tricks and shows. Vesta clearly has a crush on Dorian, but everyone is very respectful of the Manon-Dorian vibes, even though Manon is it's nothing serious. they're like, okay, well, we don't really want to upset you. You are a scary lady, so we will leave Dory alone. And Manon and Astrid are having a conversation. And Astrid's like, we're going to find the Crochans soon. And what are you going to say to them? When we find these Crochans, what will you say? And Manon reflects back on how she's supposedly this, like, child of peace. She's this, like, prophesized child of peace that is supposed to, like, reunite all the witches. But, like, she grew up in a place where, like, peace and love are not things that, like, she even knows what they really are. Like, she is just starting to learn about, like, love and peace and friendship and all of these, like, noble virtues that she is supposed to be, like, bringing to the witches. And so she's a little bit like, ITK. And so she says, I'll ask the Crochans not to shoot, I suppose. Like, that's the first thing I'm going to say to the Crochans is, like, please don't shoot us because we don't want to fight yet. And Astrid's like, no, that's not what I mean. Like, how are you going to convince them to ally with us? And, like, obviously Manon knew that. And Manon is like, we'll see if we get that far. Let's just, like, make sure they don't shoot us first. And then we can, like, figure it out from there. And Astrid says to her, we will follow you, Manon. Manon turned to her cousin. Do I deserve that honor? And Astrid says, only you can decide if you deserve it, Manon. That night, we get some updates on the Manon and Dorian situation. Apparently, they've been hooking up, like, fairly often as they've traveled. It has been, you know, like, just, like, quick little rendezvous in the night. It's happening fairly regularly. He's also been, like, training with the witches for battle, but also, like, training on how to control his magic. But tonight, Dorian has a scheme. He has a little sneaky scheme. And so he wakes up in the middle of the night and he sneaks over to where Vesta is holding watch. And he's like, I gotta go to the bathroom. And the reason he didn't put up a fight when they initially were like, oh, we're going to stop looking for the word keys is because he had this sneaky other plan. Death. That was his gift, all he seemed to be able to offer those around him. He was little better than his father in that regard. The flame flowed over him, invisible and steadying. They hadn't heard a whisper of Aelin or Rowan and their companions, not one whisper of whether the queen was still Maeve's captive. She had been willing to yield everything to save Terrasen, to save all of them. He could do nothing less. Aelin certainly had more to lose. A mate and husband who loved her, a court who would follow her into hell, a kingdom long awaiting her return. All he had was an unmarked grave for a healer no one would remember, a broken empire, and a shattered castle. Dory, we would be sad if you got sacrificed. So anyway, Dory has snuck away to summon Gavin using those word marks that Aelin used to summon Elena. And Gavin appears and Dorian bows, and Gavin is like, the summoning is not a gift to be used lightly. You risk much, young king, in calling me here, considering what you carry. And Dorian's like, okay, well, everything is really kind of risky right now. You know, it's a dangerous time. I need your help. Where is the third word key? And Gavin's like, I'm forbidden to say. And Dorian pulls out the amulet of Warrant, and he's like, okay, well, Brandon also was forbidden to do things, and Brandon defied the gods by putting the key in here and giving a warning to Aelin. The least you could do is give me some direction, like something to guide me. Because, like, obviously we can, like, skirt around the rules, you know? Like, we may need to. And Gavin says, Brandon Galathanius was an arrogant bastard. I have seen what interfering with the gods' plans brings. It will not end well. And Dorian is like, please, like, this was literally your wife's fault. So if you could help us out, that would be great. And Gavin says, my mate is the cost of this. If the keys are retrieved, she will vanish. And that, like, oh, actually, he probably could help more than he's letting on. But it's very clear that he doesn't want Dorian to find that third key because he doesn't want his wife to disappear. And Dorian is getting, like, frustrated with this because he's realizing this too. And he's like, you know, the whole world will fall if the keys are not put back in that gate. You can't be that selfish. Like, tell me anything. Like, help me. And Gavin is like, yeah, but, like, your life will be forfeit if you forge that lock. So I'm actually looking out for you. Elena helped Aelin, Dorian pressed, his breath curling in the space between them. She did not balk from it, even knowing what it meant for her fate, and neither did Aelin, who will neither have a long life with her own mate, nor eternity with him. As I will not have either. His heart began thundering, his magic rising with it. And yet you would run from it? Gavin's teeth flashed. Erewhon could be defeated without sealing the gate. And Dorian's like, okay, awesome. That sounds so great. Could you tell me how to do that? And Gavin's like, obviously he doesn't know. Otherwise he would tell Dorian. Because, like, that would be better for everyone. And so then Gavin is like, okay, fine, Dorian. But, like, your plan is then to sacrifice yourself and leave Ardeling completely kingless? Ardeling is, like, my pride. It was my kingdom. Dorian is like, and it's no longer that good. Perhaps it deserves to fall into ruin. And Gavin says to him, you are not the only one who has endured loss. If you had been given the choice between your woman and Aurelia, what would you have chosen? And Dorian says, you deluded yourself about the path ahead, yet you serve the God of truth. What does he have to say about Elena's role in this? Gavin, the all-seeing one does not claim kinship with those spineless creatures, Gavin growled. And Dorian is like, okay, then what is he? If he's not one of those gods, what is he? Gavin, can there not be many gods from many places? Some born of this world, some born elsewhere. And Dorian goes, that is a question to debate at another time, Dorian ground out, when we're not at war. Please, please help me save my friends. Help me make this right. And Gavin finally relents, and he's like, the key is at Morinth, which is like kind of what they suspected. I think, like, I'm kind of confused because I thought we all knew that the key was at Morinth. Like, I thought we all knew that, like, Erewhon himself has the key, and it's at Morinth. But anyway, Dorian's asking for more info. He's like, where in Morinth is this key? Gavin is like, the sword will show you. Do not venture towards Morinth until you are ready. And Dorian's like, okay, well, I'm ready now, so I can actually go literally whenever I want. And he's like, no. Morinth is no mere keep. It is a hell. It is not kind to reckless young men. You will know when you are ready, truly ready. Remain at this camp. If you can convince your companions, the path will find you here. Gavin's edges like start to fade. Dorian is like, wait, I have one last question. Am I human? Dorian, yeah, like, what do you mean? Stop being a weirdo. I guess he's asking like if he's Fae, or if he's just like merely a human. And I just like feel like this is not the time. And Gavin's eyes soften, just barely. I'm not the person who can answer that. And then the king was gone. Like, literally, we do not have time for this right now. Remember how you were like, this is war, we can discuss this later. We can also discuss this later, Dory. Like, stop. Cut to the rescue crew. The rescue crew is trying to figure out where they might go next, because that second commander claimed that his orders came directly from Dorian, but the other guy they'd captured maybe like last week had said that his orders were coming from a distant kingdom of Acadia. And Lorcan is like, I don't think she's in Dorian. Like, we would have heard word. Like, we know a lot of people in Dorian. We would have heard if she was back. And Maeve, like, there's just like no way Maeve could have kept that secret for this long, that she's just like back in her castle in Dorian. And Elite's like, no, Maeve is like very good at hiding things. Remember that one time that Gabriel and Fenris were hidden from Rowan in Skull's Bay? Like, Maeve is pretty good at this sort of stuff. And also at Elway, she spirited away her entire fleet. Like, they were there one minute, gone the next. I think Maeve would assume that we wouldn't even think of Dorian because it would be like the obvious choice. And so Maeve, you know, reverse psychology, maybe has Aelin there. And Gabrielle is like, she does have her army there, which like would make rescue trickier and like provide like more defenses, you know, like it would make us harder to get Aelin back. And they're fighting back and forth about what is the most likely option. And Alid feels very strongly that she's at Dorian. She's like, Anith told me to watch that interrogation, I think because something important was happening in it. And Lorcan is like, I think that's something to consider, but I see no reason that like the gods would be that clear in helping us, to be honest. I like really feel that she's probably in Acadia, Lorcan says. And Alid says the male who feels the touch of a god telling him whether to run or fight. Alid is like, you also have this connection with the gods, and it is very clear sometimes. So like, I don't know why you're being like, I don't know if they would do that. Like, you've seen them do that. And then Alid turns to Rowan and says, the call is yours, Prince. Lorcan is sitting in the corner being like, I kind of wish Rowan would just beat me up. He feels so guilty about the whole Aelin situation. He really does. He feels quite bad about it. And he wish Rowan was like a little too nice to him about it. Rowan was like, eh. And he like really wishes Rowan would have just like, you know, beat him up a few times. It would have made him feel better. And Rowan is like, okay, well, we're closer to Acadia right now than we are to Dorian. So we're going to go there first, check things out, and then if that doesn't turn up anything, we'll go to Dorian. Then we cut to kind of Lorcan, and Lorcan, his internal thoughts about Alid, because obviously a lot of his thoughts are about Alid. He like does not know how to mend their relationship. Like, Lorcan like loves Alid. He does. He's like deeply, madly, profoundly in love with this girlie. The only one who has ever like seen him and offered him a home and offered him protection. Like, he would lay down his life happily for Alid in case, like, if she was uncomfy, if she was bored, and she was like, you know what would make it more exciting? If you jumped off that cliff. He'd be like, see you in a second. Are you watching? Like, he is obsessed with her, and he just doesn't know how to fix things. And he thinks the first step to like maybe mending some part of the relationship is getting Aelin back. Like, if he's able to help get Aelin back, like maybe Alid will give him the time of day. And then we get this story that Lorcan did cut up his shirt for Alid for when she was on her period, and then gave it to Gabrielle to give to Alid, and was like, Gabrielle, don't tell her the shirt is mine, okay? But like, he's also making sure she's taken care of. And he does let himself think for a second about the fact that Aelin is immortal, and every like minute they are not spent together, there is just like robbing them of this like very limited time they could have together. Owie. Aelin walks off into the forest and Lorcan follows her, and Aelin is like, what do you want from me? Like, stop annoying me. And Lorcan is like, Acadia is like the wiser choice. It like makes more sense logically with what we know. I didn't push for it to like spite you. It wasn't like I was just like trying to be in opposition to you. And Aelin's like, I don't care. I don't care what you think, what your motives are. I don't want to talk to you. And Lorcan is like, I truly did not mean for this to happen. And Aelid's like, yeah, obviously you didn't mean for this to happen. Why would you want your blood oath severed with your cool, wonderful queen? And Lorcan is like, I don't care about that. I only wish to make things right. And it's like, that's true. He like does not care about the blood oath. And Aelin is like, I would be inclined to believe that. I like might believe you if I hadn't seen you crawl after Maeve on that beach. I like watched you. It was embarrassing. And Lorcan says, I didn't crawl after Maeve. I crawled after Aelin. When Maeve severed that oath, I couldn't move, could barely breathe. I tried to get to her, to Aelin. I tried to get to that box. He added so quietly, only Aelin could hear. I promise. And one thing we know about Lorcan, I can never remember his last name. Lorcan Salvatore, is that he keeps his promises. And Aelin is just like, doesn't want to hear it. And she stalks off and walks past Gabrielle. And Gabrielle is like, he's not lying. Like, he's telling the truth. But Aelin still doesn't seem to care. Aelin is not ready to forgive Lorcan. And then we go into a dream that Rowan is having. And it does scoop my guts out of my body and make me want to die a little bit. Okay, great. Who's excited? Prince Rowan Whitethorn Galathinius, consort, husband, and mate of the Queen of Terrasen, knew he was dreaming. He knew it because he could see her. And in his dream, he's on this opposite side of this dark chasm, and Aelin is just on the other side of the dark chasm, and he can't shift into hawk form, so he can't get to her, but he can smell her. Her like scent is carried on the wind, and he calls her name, but there's like no sound here, so like it doesn't like get to her, but she turns around anyway. It was her face, or it would be in a few years, when she settled, but it wasn't the slightly older features that knocked the breath from him. It was the hand on her rounded belly. She stared towards him, hair flowing. Behind her, 4 small figures emerged. Rowan fell to his knees. The tallest, a girl with golden hair and pine-green eyes, solemn-faced, as proud as her mother. The boy beside her, nearly her height, smiled at him, warm and bright, his Ashryver eyes near glowing beneath his cap of silver hair. The boy next to him, silver-haired and green-eyed, might as well have been Rowan's twin. And the smallest girl, clinging to her mother's leg, a fine-boned, silver-haired child, little more than a babe, her blue eyes hearkening back to a lineage he did not know. Children. His children. Their children. With another mere weeks from being born. His family. The family he might have, the future he might have, the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Aelin. Their children pressed closer to her, the eldest girl peering up to Aelin in mourning. Rowan felt it then, a lethal, mighty black wind sweeping for them. He tried to scream, tried to get off his knees, to find some way to them. The black wind roared in, ripping and tearing everything in its path, until they were staring at him as it swept them away too, until only dust and shadow remained. I'm sorry, this should be illegal. Send Sarah J. Maas straight to jail. Why would you write this? Straight to jail. Jail. Jail time. Lock her up. I cannot believe this is in this book. Oh my gosh. Obviously, I don't know to the cry out. Since you saw tears leave my eyeballs. Okay. Rowan has this dream most nights. Because he knows that every day he fails to find Aelin, she is being brutally tortured. And that just like sits heavy on him every single moment of the day. And he's just thinking about that, and then thinking about just how strange it is to have Lorcan and Gabrielle working with him without the bond of Maeve. And just like to have their friendship as like friends, and rather than like this thing that is forced. They're on their way to Acadia. He hasn't heard Aelin down the bond since that day on the beach, and he thinks that Maeve must be responsible. She must be cutting off their bond in some way. And he's beating himself up for not getting to Aelin faster, for not finding her, for not knowing that they were mates immediately. There's like so much that he like feels like they wasted their time together, and now he is wasting time. He like isn't finding her. And he's spending a lot of time also rethinking his bond with Lyra, because he found out on that beach that Lyra was not his mate, that it was a manipulation from Maeve. And it like makes a lot of sense. Like that information actually like makes a lot of sense, because although he loved Lyra very much, it never felt as like natural as it did with Aelin. Like there was just something that like pulled him to Aelin in this way that just felt completely out of out of his control, that felt like supernatural. And there was just nothing like that with Lyra. But again, he still loved this woman, and he will never forgive what Maeve did to Lyra and to their child. And Aelin has recounted everything that happened on that beach to him over and over again. And this is the moment that he comes back to. I will kill you, Aelin had said when she had heard what Maeve had done. How badly Maeve had manipulated him and shattered him and destroyed Lyra. Aelin had told him every word of the encounter, over and over. I will kill you. He prayed that fire, that rage had not broken, but they needed to hurry. He also was like unwilling to even contemplate and like consider the fact that if they are able to rescue Aelin is going to have to almost immediately like turn around and sacrifice herself to forge this lock. Like he is like, that we will find another way. Like I cannot accept that reality. And then he recalls like another piece of that day on the beach, the words that Aelin had passed along to Rowan from Aelin. And tell him thank you for walking that dark path with me back to the light, Aelin had said. It had been his honor. From the very beginning, it had been his honor, the greatest of his long, immortal life. An immortal life they would share together, somehow. He'd allow no other alternative. Rowan silently swore it to the stars. He could have sworn the Lord of the North flickered in response. A southern continent die. Oh, Chaol and Yrene, I love them so much. We get to go check out on Chaol and Yrene. They are on their ship headed north. They've been married for a month now, so it's a month since Tower of Dawn. And I love it. It's just the cutest. So the vibes between Chaol and Yrene in this book are chef's kiss, top tier. I love them so much. I love them. I don't know what's happening up in the northern continent, but they are getting close to shore. They're close enough to shore where they're going to be able to send some scouts out today to kind of like see what's happening. Chaol is still kind of like learning how to deal with his back because his back was healed in a way that it was connected to Yrene, and if Yrene's magic is depleted, his back will go out and he will be like, depending on like how depleted her magic is, he will be forced to use like various different mobility aids. So like he might be able to use a cane if she just has a little bit of magic depletion, or he might be back in the wheelchair if she's like completely depleted her magic for the day. Also, we are reminded that their lives are now tied together, that if one of them dies, both of them die. Yrene is so incredibly nervous about this. She hasn't really seen war. She saw like a little bit of the conquering of Ardalan when she was a child, but she's really nervous about like the war. They're about to enter into like war, into battle, and she knows it's going to be a difficult, dangerous time, and she's just like very nervous about it. And she just has to sit on this boat and kind of stew on it. Meanwhile, we are sending some rooks out for a scouting mission to see where they should moor the ships, kind of figure out where they need to park things. Sartak and Nesryn are sent on this mission with Kadara and Salki. Nesryn's got herself a rook now because, as a little reminder, Sartak and Nesryn have a little romance going. Sartak is literally in love with Nesryn and has been since before he knew her. It is the cutie patootiest. He like heard stories about Neith's arrow and he said, I'm gonna marry that girl someday, and he manifested that right into his life. Okay? Nesryn is the main character in Sartak's story. And it's so sweet, because she's certainly not the main character in ours. And Falcon is the shapeshifter who is related to Lysandra, and he is being a falcon today. Falcon the Falcon. As they get closer to shore, they see these big columns of smoke, and it's clear that someone had burnt down all of these like coastal farms and villages. And they see a small group of soldiers continuing to hunt down survivors from these villages, and Nesryn and Sartak descend, do some, pew, 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 and try to help the people that are still there. Meanwhile, back at the boat, Yrene is down in the cargo hold of the ship taking inventory of the supplies, of the like healer supplies. Hafitza comes downstairs to check on her and is like, hey girlie, what are you doing? The supply numbers haven't changed since we got here, so not sure why you're retaking inventory. We're not gonna be able to keep like a super tight inventory when we're on the battlefield, you know that, right? And Yrene is like, well, we're gonna try our best. Like, I'm gonna try to avoid going into complete chaos. And Hafitza's like, you will not be able to. We're going into battle. People will die, Yrene, and we will not be able to save them. And Irene's like, I know that. And Hafitza's like, we have prepared as much as we can for now. And Yrene is like, I just need to do something. And Hafitza's like, soon enough you will. Like, soon enough, you're going to have something to do. You're going to be a busy lady. But once Hafitza leaves, Yrene trails her hand across her stomach. She hasn't told anyone yet, but one of the reasons she is so nervous about this whole battle situation is because she's pregnant. Okay, let's have a talk. Okay, let's have a chat. Come on in. We're gonna have a little chat. I normally am a pregnancy hater in a book.
me immediately remembering that I wrote a novel that primarily centers around a pregnancy.
I wrote a book and it is around, the whole thing centers around pregnancy. In fact, did you guys know that? I wrote this book. Wrote it. Award winner. It's a ghost story with a pregnant lady. I do not love in a YA book in particular where our heroine gets pregnant at the end. I was like truly traumatized in Breaking Dawn when the whole Breaking Dawn was like about a pregnancy. It like really ruined me. I was like a Twilight girly, ride or die. I was reading Twilight as it was actively coming out. I like literally just like reread Twilight and New Moon. Eclipse is kind of boring, so I didn't read that many times. Just like over and over again. Love those books so much. Breaking Dawn came out and I said, ew. And that ended my Twilight obsession. I said, no thank you. I don't love it as the conclusion to a fantasy series because I really feel like it contributes. There's a lot of reasons. I could do like a whole video just on like why I think the pregnancy trope in YA fantasy in particular is troubling, but I actually like it in this. One, because I really think Throne of Glass is not really that YA. I don't. I really think by the time we're done, Aelin is 20. And I think if they were ever to make this a TV show, they'd probably age her up a couple years anyway. But I think the themes they tackle are adult. I think largely it's YA because it was written by a woman. Sorry. And I think we talk about Throne of Glass like generically now more as like a general fantasy novel because Sarah's newer work is a little bit more adult. This is not adult in terms of content, but I think in terms of like themes and things it explores, it is fairly adult. And in the fact that we have like multiple marriages happening. It's weird to me when the YA books end in marriages too. Like, girly, I'm trying to pass calculus. Like, why are you getting married? Because treating this as an adult book, I had less of an issue with it. I also have less of an issue with this pregnancy in particular because it happens so early into this last book. And as we kind of see this pregnancy play out, it does not become Irene's sole personality trait. It does not become she abandons everything that has to do with healing in order to just be like, become a womb. You know? And I do feel like that sometimes happens at the end of fantasy novels where they're like, okay, we did all the world saving. Now I'm just a womb. And I don't love that. I don't like those vibes at all. Not my favorite at all. I really feel this is done like, pretty well. Honestly, I kind of love it. I think it's kind of cute and kind of fun. Sue me. Back with the witches, Dorian sneaks back to bed and he's freaking out about that final key being in Morinth. I don't know why. Again, I really think we thought we knew that. Like, let's use our nogs. Where would Erewhon keep that last key? With him. He doesn't think Manon is going to take him back to Morinth because it was so hard for the witches to leave Morinth. And like there's like still a large contingent of witches in Morinth. So like it would be very dangerous for the witch girlies to go back there. So we might have to figure out how to do it alone. But that's a problem for the morning. And in the morning, Dorian's the last one sleeping. He wakes up and everyone else is like ready to leave. And Dorian was like, okay, where are we headed today? And Sorrel was like, we were actually just discussing it. We're not sure exactly. And Ashton was like, we're going to head south because we've already searched up north. And Sorrel's like, well, we don't even know the Crochans are in the mountains. Right now they're like searching kind of like through the White Fang Mountains. Like, honestly, they don't have much of an idea at all of where the Crochans might be, and Dorian is really worried that they are going to head further away from Morinth. And Dorian is trying to, like, figure out how he's going to ask Manon to go to Morinth when a polar bear appears. A polar bear appears, and it, like, ignores everyone else and goes straight for Manon. It's going to eat her up. And Dorian hits the polar bear with his magic, and it shifts into a spider. It is the spider that Manon stole spider silk from back in Heir of Fire. And they like quickly figure this out and Manon is like, oh my gosh, you're a long way from the ruins, sister. And the spider goes, you were not so hard to find despite it. And Ashton says, you know the spider? And Manon is like, yeah, she donated spider silk for Braxis's wings. And the spider is like, you stole my silk and shoved me and my weavers off of a cliff. That is not what happened. I did not donate it. And Dorian is like, actually, I have a question. How can you shapeshift? And Dorian, again, this is not really the time for this question. I need you to read the room. Look around, buddy. But the spider explains. The spider's like, actually, let's pause and answer Dorian's question. Keep being curious, Dorian. I took 2 decades from a young merchant's life in exchange for my silk. The gift of his shifting flowed through some of his life force, some of it at least. All those eyes narrowed on Manon. He willingly paid the price. This spider is the spider that Falcon sold the years of his life to. And now the spider's after Manon. It's all connected. And then the spider shifts into a girly. And Manon is like, okay, well, you're a girly right now, but like you could just shift back into a spider in the night and kill us all. And Dorian is like, she won't. She won't. She's not going to. I don't know why Dorian says this. Dorian, what information do you have about the spider girl that makes you convinced that she's not going to shift and eat you all in the night? But the girlies believe Dorian. And they get ready to leave. And Manon turns to Dorian and says, "You are different today. You're being a little weird." And he shrugs. "If you wanted someone to warm your bed who cowers at every word and obeys every command, look elsewhere." He's like, "I'm a tough, cool guy. You can't just boss me around. I'm a tough, cool guy. And I kissed every girlie back at the Glass Castle. I don't know if you knew that, but it's true." And Manon is like, okay, anyway, why shouldn't I just kill that spider? Like, why are we keeping her around?" And Dorian's like, "I think she could be useful. Like, could I convince you of it somehow?" And Manon's like, "Okay, whatever. No, like, just bring the spider. We'll find out soon enough if we can trust her. And it is going to be on you if we can't." Aelin check-in. These literally make me nauseous. I, like, hate when we get to one. I, like, don't want to check on her. Can somebody please get her out? I don't like checking on her, my poor little baby. She is currently in her iron coffin, looking at the carvings of the sun that are inside. A little reminder that Maeve made this coffin just for her, before she was even born. Last session with Karen, he had heated her shackles, her iron shackles that she wears, and then put them on her. Put flaming hot iron shackles on her wrists, and then broke all the bones in her hands and arms. So that was her morning. She's pushing on the lid of the iron coffin, seeing if she can get it to move, when she hears Fenris. He gives like a little whine to warn her that Karen is coming. And Karen pulls her from the iron coffin, leaving the iron mask and iron chains on her, and she can't see, but she knows she's like heavily guarded, and they move her from the basement where they keep her coffin to wherever they're taking her today. They're like taking her all over the palace or wherever they're keeping her. And as she walks, she feels the fresh air on her skin for a second and thinks about running. She doesn't know if she even has enough muscle to do it. Like, even if they let go of her, she doesn't know if, because she's like essentially just been like laying down for 2 months. She doesn't know if she has like enough strength in her to even run away. She also knows that if she flees, they will kill Fenris, like, immediately. And so she doesn't even try to fight. Karen led her up a winding staircase that had her rasping for breath, the mist fading away to cool night air. Sweet smells, flowers. Flowers still existed in this world, in this hell. Flowers bloomed somewhere. And he removes the hood that they had put on her, and she's standing in the throne room where she had severed Rowan's blood oath, where she had freed him and bound them together. The mask is still on her. I know in my picture it is not on her anymore, but it like hurts my feelings to look at her in the mask. So just know that most of the time she's in that mask, but like I can't look at her in it because it hurts my feelings too. That's why it's off. Maeve makes Aelin wear Mab's crown, but this crown has like an iron core, which is super uncomfortable because, again, any place that iron is touching is like uncomfortable because it like suppresses their magic. I think burns them maybe a little bit too. I don't know how burny it is, but definitely uncomfy. And then Karn shoves her bare feet into broken glass and then shoves her to her knees. So she's kneeling and she's just wearing like a little white shift dress. Again, my depiction is not completely accurate where she's wearing like her assassin suit. She's actually wearing like a little white shift dress. And so her bare knees are on broken glass and she is just bleeding in a puddle at Maeve's feet and trying not to scream. And then Maeve, so Connall is right next to Maeve. Connall is that black wolf. And Maeve says to Connall, "You may tell your twin what you wish to say." And Connall turns back into like a boy to talk to Fenris. A little refresher on Fenris and Connall. So Fenris and Connall are twins. Connall fell in love with Maeve, and Fenris and Connall were blood oaths to Maeve, largely because Fenris loved his brother and he wanted to stay with his brother. Fenris has always kind of hated Maeve and hated this connection, like this blood oath and this binding to Maeve, but like remains largely for Connall, for his brother. And Maeve says to him, "Speak freely, let your brother know these words aren't under my command." Just, you know, to like make it clear to everyone in the room that like Connall is speaking freely. And Connall says to his brother, "You brought this upon yourself. Your arrogance, your unchecked recklessness was this what you wanted? You couldn't have let me have any part of this for myself. You took the blood oath not to serve our queen, but so that you couldn't be bested by me for once in your life. You are a disgrace to this family, to this kingdom. You hoard yourself to a foreign queen, and for what? I begged you to control yourself when you were sent to hunt Lorcan. I begged you to be smart. You might as well have spat in my face." Fenris snarls, and clearly Connall could understand him even in wolf form. And Connall returns, "Leave? I'll never leave. Neither will you." And then Maeve's like, "Okay, that's enough, Connall. Back to dog form." And Maeve says, "Look, Aelin, this can all end if you just tell me where you hid the word keys. We can be done with this whole thing if you just tell me where you hid the word keys." And Aelin uses this moment to flip Maeve off. She gives a vulgar gesture. And then Karen pushes on her shoulders. So remember, she's kneeling in broken glass. Karen leans into her and Aelin screams. She can't like suppress the scream any longer. And Maeve says, the strangest thing happened. I just got word that you are in Terrasen, readying your little army alongside Prince Rowan, my 2 disgraced warriors, and the rest of your usual group. And Aelin thinks to herself. She hadn't realized she'd been holding on to it. That sliver of hope. Foolish and pathetic, that sliver of hope that he'd come for her. She had told him not to, after all. Had told him to protect Terrasen, had arranged everything for him to make a desperate stand against Morianth. Maeve says, it is useful to have a shapeshifter, though. I'm not sure how long that will last until people realize she doesn't have your gifts. I do not wish to wipe this world away, Maeve says, as Erewhon does. I like Aurelia precisely the way it is. I always have. And then we hear that the glass that she's making Aelin kneel on is from dragons, but it's from an earlier war. And Maeve wiped out all the dragons because fire is dangerous to Valg, and since she's a Valg, she didn't want dragons around. And Aelin feels so much sadness for these dragons. She feels this kinship to these dragons who were just wiped out for existing. She's just sad and hopeless and miserable. She's having a terrible time. All the while, Maeve is sitting in her throne eating wine and cheese, while Aelin continues to kneel on glass. Deep, deep she drifted, Aelin. It did not matter if Rowan wasn't coming. If the others had obeyed her wishes to fight for Terrasen, she would save it too, in her own way. For as long as she could, she owed Terrasen that much, would never fully repay that debt. And Aelin goes into her memories and thinks about a time when her dad was showing her this ancient shield, saying it would be passed on to her because she would be the queen someday. And you, her father went on, like the many great women and men of this house, shall use it to defend our kingdom. Her eyes rose to his face. Handsome and unlined, solemn and kingly. That is your charge, your sole duty. He braced a hand on the rim of the shield, tapping it for emphasis, to defend Aelin, to protect. And Aelin is going to do that, even though she's trapped. She's going to continue to defend Aelin, to defend Terrasen with everything she can. And then Cairn shoves her back down into the glass again and pulls her out of that memory. And Maeve is like, oh, I'm growing so bored of this. Do you believe, Aelin Galathinius, that I will not make the sacrifices necessary to obtain what I seek? And then she gives Connall a knife, and Connall goes over to Fenris with that knife, and Aelin tries to find her voice to say no, no, please don't hurt Fenris, but she can't. And then Connall stabs himself in his heart. And all the while, Fenris is just crying, whining and crying. The whole reason that he was here was for his brother. Now his brother has stabbed himself in the heart. You tainted something that belonged to me, Aelin Galathinius, Maeve said. Now it must be purged. Connall's not breathing, and Aelin just slumps over into the glass. She can't even hold herself up anymore. There's no one here to help you. Maeve's voice was as empty as the gaps between stars. And there's no one coming for you. Think on it. Think on it this night, Aelin. Maeve snapped at her fingers. We're done here. And Cairn raises her to her feet, and we learn that she did not slump over into the glass because she was so sad. She was not so saddened by this. I mean, a little bit. She is very sad for Fenris. But it was also at a moment where she was standing in a pile of sharp objects, and she said, I just need a little sharp object and I can do some real damage. And so as Cairn raises her to his feet, she turns around and has glass in both of her fists and uses it to slice the sides of his neck. She throws the glass at Maeve, and she has black blood trickling down her cheeks. Remember, Aelin and the gang does not know that Maeve is Valg. A blink, and then the blood flowed red. It sent as coppery as her own. A trick of the light, a hallucination, another dream. Maeve peered at the crimson stain coating her pale fingers. An onyx wind snapped for Aelin, wrapping around her neck. It squeezed, and she knew no more. When she comes to, she's back in that basement room on the altar, blood still leaking from her body from all the glass in her legs and her hand. And Fenris is in Fae form, and he comes in, and Aelin blinks 3 times. Are you all right? And Fenris blinks in response, no. He's just lost his brother. And Aelin says, I'm sorry. And Fenris says, I didn't know he hated me so much. And he's only allowed to stay in Fae form to pick the glass out of her skin, and then he is forced to return to Wolf form. And Aelin starts to cry because she is so desperate for just a friendly voice, a gentle touch. So sad after learning Rowan isn't coming for her. She just feels so lonely and hopeless after learning that Rowan is not coming for her, which is not true. We know Rowan is coming for her. She just wants Fenris to be a person that is with her. And Fenris thinks that she's hurt. And he's like, I'm gonna get these pieces of glass out as quick as I can. But she doesn't even care about the physical pain. It's just this hopelessness, this isolation, this desperation. I'm back. I left for a moment. So if everything's different, It is. We're going to check in with the troops. We're going to check with Aedion and everyone. So last we left them, they were headed back up the coast to head off Erewhon's troops along the Florian River. So we meet back up with them, and they've been battling for a little bit, and they've been holding the line, but with like a lot of difficulty. Lysandra has been fighting in her snow leopard form. They've been pretending that Aelin is still like en route. Aelin has not arrived yet. Remember, we sent her on a little errand to a coastal city, and we're pretending she's still on that errand. So Lysandra's been able to fight in her ghost leopard form for most of this battle. Morinth has sent an army of about 5,000 men, and so they're mostly only using the Bane against them. They don't want to reveal the fact that Aedion Ashryver has sent his troops, and so they have Fae soldiers among them as well. They also have these silent assassins. They kind of want to reserve that unless they truly need those, because, you know, having surprises in their back pocket will be helpful in overall the larger war, because we have like a lot of war coming. War is a long thing. Eventually, they finally do win the battle. They're having a post-war chat. Aedion and Ren, and then the two princes from Surya, Ravi and Sol. Okay? We've got some random other princes. And Aedion thinks to himself, where Lysandra had gone, he did not know. She'd survived, which he supposed was enough. Okay? Overall, they lost about 250 men, which isn't terrible, but like, isn't great. And now they're trying to discuss strategy of what's happening next. They know that Erewhon's troops are clearly around. Obviously, they're not going to be just waiting for the spring, as the lords supposed. And so there is this thought of like, maybe they should go and defend Orinth. Like, they should pull back to Orinth. It'll be an easier place for them to shelter for longer. For the winter, obviously they'll be able to get supplies easier, those sorts of things, where if they're in the mountains, it's harder to get access to those sorts of things. But if they head to the border, they'll be able to protect like more of Terrasen. But it is a more remote area, so it'll be like harder to get supplies, and also if Orinth falls under attack, they're going to be further away from that. And so Ravi and Sol are kind of like going back and forth. Aedion is so annoyed that he is being expected to win this war and strategize and plan this fight by committee. He's like, I don't understand why all these people need to be involved, honestly, in the planning process. Like, this would go so much better if I was able to plan things independently or with like a small council of people I trusted, rather than having to run every decision, not only past like our allies, these princes that have lent us their armies, but also like all the lords of Terrasen. And he's just like so annoyed. But Ren is there to remind him that if they do anything without getting permission from those lords of Terrasen, it technically would be treason. And Aedion's trying to figure out what to do next when a messenger shows up. And the messenger says, Lord Darrow bids you join him tomorrow, like he wants to have a convo with you. And Aedion is like, hey, what's your name? You look kind of familiar. He doesn't say you look kind of familiar, but he does look familiar to us, because this is Nox. This is Nox Owens from Paranth, our bestie way back in Throne of Glass, like the actual first book, who Aelin became friends with during the competition and warned him to leave the palace so he didn't get eaten up by Cain. Ren is like, I've heard of you. You're like a thief turned messenger. And Nox is like a former thief, now a rebel, and Lord Darrow's most trusted messenger. Anyway, we just have Nox here, which is exciting. We love a little cameo. Who thought Nox was going to show up? We love a cameo from an earlier book. And anyway, they go back to arguing about like what they should be doing next. And Aedion is like, okay, we have to go talk to Lord Darrow. Like, that's order of business number one. We go to travel to Lord Darrow at dawn tomorrow. And Aedion is finally headed to bed, and he's walking through camp, and he's just like saying goodnight to everyone as he goes. I want to read you this little clip because I do think this is interesting. I do think Aedion is actually like a fairly good commander, even if he is a kind of bad person. He halted at other fires as well, to commend the fighting done, whether the soldiers hailed from Terrasen or the Wastes or Wendelin. And at a few of them, he even shared in their ales or meals. Ro had taught him the art of making his men want to follow him, die for him. But more than that, seeing them as men, as people with family and friends who had as much to risk as he did in fighting here. It was no burden, despite the exhaustion creeping over them, to thank them for their courage and their swords. I, again, love so much, and Sarah does it throughout this book, how much she like humanizes the loss of like these unnamed men. Like, we lost 250 men. And we get this moment in which Aedion is recognizing like the humanity of these like troops that we don't know. Like, we don't know the names and faces of all the men that are fighting for Terrasen, but I think this serves as like a reminder that like these are people, that they're like real lives being lost in this war. And there's like tragedy in that, even if it is for the greater good. Lysandra is waiting for him when he arrives back at his tent, and she's like, hey, I could fly to Darrow tonight and deliver any message you want. Like, we don't have to necessarily, you know, pick up camp and send everyone there. And Aedion's like, I mean, we don't need to, because, like, I know what he's going to say. Like, he wants us to move the army back to him and then to Orinth. Immediately. Like, that's what he wants. And Lysandra's like, I can go and tell him that the army needs time to rest, that, like, we need a few more days. And Aedion's like, is this some attempt to re-enter my good graces? No. She probably doesn't care about that. She actually probably just wants to make sure this war goes off as well as possible. Lysandra says, I don't give a damn about your good graces. That's right. Nor should you. I care about this army being worn down by unnecessary movements. I literally cannot stand Aedion right now. Like, he's grinding on every last gear I have. Grow up. Grow up. Have you learned nothing from what happened with Aelin and you? And Aedion's like, well, how do you know what was said in that tent? And Lysandra says, if you don't want me sitting in on the war council, just say so. She, like, had obviously shapeshifted into something to, like, perch in over here. And Aedion's, like, annoyed about it. And then Aedion says to her, when exactly will our queen make her grand return? And she's like, whenever you want me to, Aedion. Tonight, if you think it's wise. And Aedion's like, no, it wouldn't be wise to, like, miss the battle only to appear and bask in the glory of the victory. I doubt the troops would find that heartening. And Lysandra's like, okay, then tell me when and I will do it. And Aedion says, just as you blindly obeyed our queen, now you will obey me. And Lysandra says, I obey no man. But I am not fool enough to believe I know more about armies and soldiers than you do. My pride is not so easily bruised. She says, I understand where my limitations are. I don't assume that I'm going to be the smartest person in every room. So while no, I don't bow to you, I'm willing to listen to you, because those are two different things. You dumb. Aedion took a step forward, and mine is his pride. Easily bruised. Yeah. What I did for her and for this kingdom. Look at these men, your men. Look at the allies we've gathered and tell me that if they knew the truth, they would be so eager to fight. Aedion says, the Bane fought when we believed her dead. It would be no different. And Lysandra goes on, it might be for our allies, for the people of Terrasen. Go ahead and punish me for the rest of your life, for 1,000 years if you wind up settling. We have enough enemies as it is, Lysandra went on. But if you truly wish to make one of me as well, fine. I don't regret what I did, nor will I ever. And Aedion, all he could think to say is, fine. She shrewdly looked over him, as if weighing the man within. It was real, Aedion. All of it. I don't care if you believe me or not, but it was real. For me. He couldn't bear to hear it. I have a meeting, he lied. And he stepped around her. Go slither off somewhere else. Lysandra just goes to bed and is sad. Okay, so I think from this we are to also summarize that Aedion is a little injured because he thinks that Lysandra's advances were all about this scheme. And, like, that's not true. Lysandra did have a little crushy crush on Aedion. They had some romance between them. Back on the boat with the Southern Continent contingent, Nezrin and Sartaq have returned from their scouting trip and they are reporting back. They report that they have seen Moranth's legion. It's about 10,000 foot soldiers, but there are no witches in this legion of men that is close to the shore. And Sartaq's like, so they didn't say much. We weren't able to, like, gather much information from them except where they're headed. They're headed to Anielle, which is Chaol's family home. And Chaol is like, why? That doesn't really make sense. And Yrene is like, yes, it does. They're clearing the way for the troops. They know that if they clear that area, they're going to be able to go right through there and into Terrasen. And Sartaq is like, does Anielle have an army? Chaol's like, not one big enough to handle that many troops. Is it worth it to launch our troops here in March to save Anielle? And then they start talking about, like, the possible things they could do from here. So this little boat is where they're at. The green flag is the battle that Aedion and the gang just won. And the red flag is where Moranth's troops are currently sitting. Or the fleet that they're worried about going to Anielle. Anelle's in the blue circle. So there are kind of three options that they can take in terms of what they can do from here. The dark blue option is they dock immediately. They immediately go to shore and they march their troops straight across the plains for Anielle. 2, they go north a bit and try to cut off Moranth's troops. I don't understand the math on this one, but they try to go a little bit further north and then cut down and cut off Moranth's troops on the way to Anielle. Pink is they kind of ignore the Anielle situation. They go all the way up to Terrasen, try to get support from Terrasen, and then head back down to Anielle from there. And Hussar is like, what if we just kind of ignore the Anielle problem? We didn't worry about it. Like, it's just a city. And Yrene is like, it's his home. Chaol doesn't really also think that's a compelling enough reason to go, but he continues. The Avery splits near Anielle, he murmured, running a finger along it. If you're southwards towards the Silver Lake in Anielle, and then the other branch runs northward, past the Farian Gap, skirting along the ruins and up to nearly the border of Terrasen itself. We could avoid the Avery until Anielle, march inland, and then when the city is secure, we begin a campaign northward along the Avery. And Hussar's like, we would face the witches in the Ferry and Gap then. And Sartaq is like, that's okay, we have the rooks. And Chaol is like, at the very least, we do need to warn them. Can we spare a rook and a rider to take me to Anielle so I can talk with them? And Yrene is like, I will come too, obviously, because I'm your wife. And Sartaq is like, yeah, we can do that. Why don't you hold the defenses for as long as you can, Lord Westfall? The rooks will follow behind you. Like, we'll send the cavalry of the rooken behind you, and the foot soldiers will be a week behind that. Chaol clasps Sartaq's hands, and then Hussar's. Thank you. Hussar's mouth curved into a half smile. Thank us if we save your city. So the plan is to send Chaol ahead with also a legion of rooken to be like the first line of defense, and then the foot soldiers are going to follow. So they're going to follow something pretty close to that blue path, it seems. Aelin check-in time. Everything. She'd given everything for this, and I've been glad to do it. Aelin lay in darkness, the slab of iron like a starless night overhead. Perhaps it had all been for nothing. The queen who was promised to die, to surrender herself to fulfill an ancient princess's debt, to save this world. She wouldn't be able to do it. She would fail in that, even if she outlasted Maeve. Outlasted what she might have glimpsed lay beneath the queen's skin, if it had been real at all. Against Erewhon there had been little hope. But against Maeve as well, silent tears pooled in her mask. It didn't matter. She wasn't leaving this place, this box. She would never again feel the buttery warmth of sun on her hair or a sea-kissed breeze on her cheeks. She couldn't stop crying, ceaseless and relentless, as if some dam had cracked open inside of her, the moment she'd seen the blood dribble down Maeve's face. She didn't care if Cairn saw the tears, smelled them. Let him break her until she was bloody smithereens on the floor. Let him do it over and over again. She wouldn't fight. Couldn't bear to fight. Aelin is sobbing in her iron coffin, and she, truly just, doesn't care if Cairn hears her at this point. She can't pretend that she's, unmoved by all of this. And Cairn is talking about how he's going to repay her when he lets her out of the box for cutting his neck, for attacking him like that. And she thinks to herself, for Terrasen. She had gladly done this, all of it for Terrasen. She deserved to pay this price. She had tried to make it right, had tried and failed, and she was so, so tired. And then she hears a whisper, Fireheart. And then again, Fireheart. It's her mother's voice. Fireheart, why do you cry? And Aelin couldn't answer. Fireheart. The words were a gentle brush down her cheek. Fireheart, why do you cry? And from far away, deep within her, Aelin whispered towards that last ray of memory, because I am lost and I do not know the way. And then she sees her mother in the iron coffin next to her. She sees her, face in the dark. Aedion Ashryver ran a gentle finger over Aelin's cheek, over the mask. Aelin could have sworn she felt them against her skin. You have been very brave, her mother said. You have been so very brave for very long. But you must be brave a little while longer, my Fireheart. She leaned into her mother's touch. You must be brave a little while longer, and remember, her mother placed a phantom hand over Aelin's heart. It is the strength of this that matters. No matter where you are, no matter how far, this will lead you home. Aelin managed to slide a hand up to her chest to cover her mother's fingers. Only thin fabric and iron met her skin. But Aelin Ashryver held Aelin's gaze, the softness turning hard and gleaming as fresh steel. It is the strength of this that matters, Aelin. Aelin dug her fingers into her chest as she mouthed. This, the strength of this. Aelin nodded. Cairn's hissed threats danced through the coffin, his knife scraping and scraping. Aelin's face didn't falter. You are my daughter. You were born of two mighty bloodlines. That strength flows through you, lives in you. Evelyn's face blazed with the fierceness of a woman who had come before them, all the way back to that fairy queen, whose eyes they both bore. You do not yield. And then she was gone, like dew under the morning sun. But the words lingered, blossomed within Aelin, as bright as a kindled ember. You do not yield. Karn scraped his dagger over the metal, right above her head. When I cut you up this time, I'm going to... Aelin slammed her hand into the lid. Karn paused. Aelin pounded her fist into the iron again. Again, you do not yield. Again, you do not yield. Again, until she was alive with it. Until her blood was raining onto her face, washing away the tears, until every pounding of her fist in the iron was a battle cry. You do not yield. You do not yield. You do not yield. It rose in her, burning and roaring, and she gave it to herself, wholly to it. Distantly, close by, wood crashed, like someone had staggered into something, then shouting. They wind up sedating her, and when she wakes up, she's changed the altar again. But she looks over and she sees what she did to the coffin. She completely warped the lid. It almost broke. She almost was able to break her way out. It's so good. That part is so good. There's a lot of catchphrases. There's a lot of catchphrases in the SGM world. And "you do not yield" is my favorite. It's my personal favorite. Okay. To the rescue crew, let's check on them, because that little show that Aelin just put on also sent a ripple of something through the world. On a dark hilltop overlooking a sleepy kingdom, Rowan froze. It hit him a heartbeat later, erupted around him and roared, over and over and over, as if it were a hammer against an anvil. The others whirled to him. That raging, fiery song charged closer, through him, down the mating bond, down into his very soul, a bellow of fury and defiance. They all felt it, and it came from the north, from Dorian. And then the mating bond cuts out again. And Rowan, does not allow himself to, think about why that mating bond cut out, because it's still there. He knows that Aelin is alive. He just can't feel anything more. But that, bond is still there, even if it's not, And so he sent words along it, with as much hope and fury and unrelenting love as he had felt from her. "I will find you." And then Rowan's like, "Okay, we go to Dora now. We need to draw Maeve out and away from Aelin." And Lorcan is like, if she finds out we are coming, she's going to move Aelin. We, cannot let her, let on to the fact that we know where Aelin is now. And Rowan says, "I know we will draw her out with a different lure. We're not going to lure her out by saying, we're coming, because she's going to get skittish and run away. I have a plan. I have a scheme." The witches... The spider spoke true. So the spider had told them, I don't think I actually mentioned this during the last slide. The reason they decided to keep the spider alive is the spider was like, "I actually know where the Crochans are, and I can lead you to them. If you want to keep me alive, I can help you." And the girlies didn't believe her. But they listened to Dorian, because Dorian was like, "I think she's going to know where the witches are." And it does turn out the spider is going to lead them right to the witches. They look down this mountain range and they see the Crochan camp. It is a smallish camp. There's about 75 of them. And the 13 are like, "Okay, what do we do now?" And Manon turns to Dorian and says, "You can stay up here if you want, since you don't have nails or teeth and you're kind of not as cool. But we're going to head on down to go chat with them. And then you can come down when it's safe if you want." And Dorian says, "And miss all the fun? We all go in together." And so they head down the mountain, and pretty soon the Crochans are shouting and pointing arrows at the 13 and Dorian, but they don't shoot immediately. Lovely. And they're they send an emissary out essentially to talk with Manon, and the Crochan that they meet on that mountainside says, "Interesting replacements for your brooms," kind of gesturing at the wyverns, "and interesting company you keep," meaning both the spider girly and I think Dorian. And Manon is like, "We mean you no harm." And the Crochan says, "No threats from the white demon, or are the rumors true that you have broken with your grandmother? Rumors also claim that you were gutted at her hand, but here you are, hale and hunting us once more. Perhaps the rumors about your defection aren't true either." And Dorian is like, "No, she actually did break from her grandmother a while ago, and then I actually rescued her from the sea. She did get pretty badly beat up from her grandma, but I rescued her from the sea, and then I sort of saved her life, and now we're here." Dorian, you didn't need to say her whole life story, buddy. It's okay. And the Crochan is like, "Who the heck are you? Why did you bring a boy here?" And Dorian says, "I'm Dorian Havillard, King of Ardelade, at your service." He is using his flirting superpowers, which we do love. I love when Dorian gets to tap into his flirting superpowers, his true power. He might have some ice magic power, some shadow hands, but his true power is flirting. The Crochan is like, "Okay, cool. Could you explain kind of what's going on?" And Dorian is like, "Oh my gosh, so much. We've actually been looking for you for 2 whole months, and we are so glad we finally found you." And the Crochan, which is like, "Has Ardeline been looking for us, or have the Iron Teeth been looking for us?" And Manon is like, "Well, kind of both. We will not harm you. You can stand down." And the Crochan witch is like, "Okay, so I don't want to be remembered as the girl who believed Manon Blackbeak when she said, 'We're not going to hurt you.' So we shan't be doing that, but thank you so much for the offer." And then she points Manon deeper into the camp. She's like, "But you can come in. We still were going to cut you up if you start to cause any shenanigans, but come on in. Let's show you to the people you need to be talking to." And then we meet this old lady, and she says, "So the hunters have become the hunted." The ancient witch paused at the edges of her ranks, surveying Manon. There was a kindness on the witch's face, Dorian noted, and wisdom, and something he realized like sorrow. It didn't halt him from sliding a hand onto Damaris's pommel, as if he were resting it casually. He was like, "If this old lady comes for Manon, I am going to cut her up." Which is nice, I guess. I don't know. She seems like a pretty chill old lady. And Manon says, "Hi, we are here because we want to talk with you. We mean you no harm. Also, who are you?" And the woman says, "I am Glennis. My family served the Crochan royals long before the city fell." The ancient witch's eyes went to the strip of red cloth tying Manon's braid. "Rhiannon found you then." Manon says Rhiannon did not make it out of the Farian Gap. And this is the Crochan she killed at the end of Aerofire, who is like her cousin, her sister, or something. Her sister. You knew her then? And Glennis says, I was her great-grandmother, as I am yours. And then everyone gets invited into camp. And then Dorian's like, Manon, did you know your great-grandma was alive? Manon's like, no. And Dorian's like, okay, how do you want to play this? Do you want me to be like quiet and stay out of the way, or do you want me to like be by your side, or like should I be bad cop and you be good cop? Like what's the scheme? What's the deal? And Manon is like, whoa, Astrid is my second, sir. So step back. Dorian's like, well, what am I then? And Manon's like, you're the king of Ardelane, so you already could have a role. And Dorian's like, okay, so does that mean like I'm gonna be part of the discussions, or like am I not invited to the witch discussions? Manon's like, I mean, if you feel like it, you can do whatever you want. And Dorian's voice dropped into a low purr. Do you know what I feel like doing? Manon's literally giggling over this. Dorian's flirting superpower is so strong. He's so strong, he's so talented, I love him so much. And Dorian is like, they know who you are, proving that part of it is over. Whether they accept you will be the true matter. These do not seem like witches that will be won by brutality. And Manon's like, excuse me, are you trying to give me advice here? And Dorian says, consider it a tip from one monarch to another. Dorian's like, also, if they decide to go crazy and beat you up, I've been tunneling down into my magic, so if they get up to any funny business, I will explode them. So don't even worry about that. I'm going to take care of you, Miss Manon. But then a horn goes off. Turns out the Iron Teeth have found them. 2 yellow leg covens descend on them, and Dorian starts pew 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 shooting them down with ice magic, while the 13 run for their wyverns to meet the yellow legs in the air. The Crochan witches are on their brooms and they're shooting arrows, and Glennis is like shooting arrows like crazy, and she's joking around with Dorian as they like stand next to each other, and he shoots them down with ice magic, and Glennis is using her bow and arrow. And Dorian is thinking to himself, I wish you were my great-grandmother. You're so cool. But you know, alas, you have a boring great-grandmother. We can't all have Glennis be our great-grandmother. The yellow leg witches are getting knocked out of the sky, and Manon gives the command to the Crochans, clear out from form lines low to the ground, because the wyverns are going to come in and take care of the rest. Glennis shouted, some magic no doubt amplifying her voice. Follow her command. She gives the command to follow Manon. And the 13 start to rip through the yellow legs' ranks, because the 13 are so organized. Like the yellow legs are kind of sloppy, but not Manon's girlies. They've got a plan. They've got marching orders. The wyverns might have survived, but the riders did not. Pity mingled with fear and rage in his heart. This is Dorian thinking. How many of those beasts might have been like Abraxas if they had had good riders who loved them? He's like, oh, those guys are good boys. Probably. But Dorian is killing them anyway, because it is more important to keep all the girlies safe. Then the battle is over, and Manon and Glennis are talking. There were no enemy survivors, and one of the dark-haired Crochan, who was the one that greeted them initially, turns to Manon and says, you did this. You led them here. And Manon is like, no, I saved you. And Glennis is like, Bronwyn, that's the dark-haired witch, that's enough. They fought with us, not against us. But then she turns to Manon and says, swear you did not lead them to us. And Manon is like, I swear it. And Glennis is like, okay, then we will talk later. And Dorian thinks to himself, oh my gosh, Manon, is lying. She's a little liar. She did bring them here, but he's holding it together. And he helps them start to clean up camp. She was a liar and a killer, and would likely have to be both again before this was through. But Manon had no regrets about what she had done. Had no room in her for regret. Not with time bearing down on them. Not with so much resting on their shoulders. For long hours they worked to repair camp. And Crochans, Manon monitored the frosty skies. 8 dead. It could have been worse, much worse. Though she would take the lives of those 8 Crochans with her. Learn their names so she could remember them. So Manon did plan that little scheme. And she does feel bad that some Crochans died. But also, you gotta do what you gotta do. And as she's helping clean up the yellow leg bodies, she realizes that, like, she sacrificed these yellow legs too. Like, these are both her people. Like, she is a daughter of both witch clans. And both the Crochans and the yellow legs, both those lives lost are lives that she will have to carry. And we learn that, like, Manon did indeed lure the yellow legs there because she wanted to prove the Blackbeak's loyalty, the 13's loyalty to the Crochans, in the only way she knew how, which is battle and fighting. Dorian's clearly watching her with a side eye. He knows she's lying, and Manon's like, okay, I'm gonna have to deal with that combo later. I'm gonna have to talk down Dorian, who clearly knows I was lying. And then Glennis offers them all Manon and the 13 stew. And while they're eating, Glennis says, wow, it's been over 500 years since an Iron Teeth witch and a Crochan witch shared a meal, since they sought to exchange words in peace, interrupted perhaps only by your mother and father. I was your father's grandmother, she clarified at last. I myself bore your grandfather, who made it a Crochans queen before she died, giving birth to your father. So we like learn where Mannon's origins come from. So Crochans occasionally have boys. The Iron Teeth do not have boys. No boys allowed in the Iron Teeth. But occasionally the Crochans do have boys. And so we learn that like Mannon's father was this woman's grandson. Yeah. And then her mom was a Blackbeak from Grandma Blackbeak's daughter. That evening, Dorian is off by himself and he's really grappling with Mannon's scheme and his feelings around it. He's like not feeling like particularly great about the fact that she sacrificed so many lives in order to like prove trust. And so he's kind of like wandering around and he winds up talking with Yrene the spider. And Dorian is like, hey Yrene, where does the shifting come from inside of you? Like, how are you able to shift? And the spider goes, that was a great feat of magic you performed. What a king it might make you, unchallenged and unrivaled. Like, wow, this is like super impressive. And Dorian's like, anyway, that's not the question I asked you. I asked you where your shifting magic comes from inside of you. Like, how does it work? How does it feel? And the spider explains, it was strange, mortal king, to find that I had a new place within me with the return of magic, to find that something new had taken root. Her small hand drifted to her middle, just above her navel. A little seed of power. I will the shift. Think of what I wish to be, and change starts within here first. Always the heat comes from here. The spider settled her stare on him. If you wish to be something, king with no crown, then be it. That is what the secret to shifting. Be what you wish. And Dorian starts asking like a bunch of follow-up questions, and they're going back and forth, and the spider is like explaining how she can like change details of a creature, but if it's a creature she's never seen before, she can't shift into it. And Dorian like tries it. Dorian tries it. He's like, I'm gonna shift into whatever I wish to be. Okay? And this is what our boy, he's like, oh, if I could shift into anything, this is what I would shift to be. He thought of brown eyes. Pictured Chaol's bronze eyes, fierce after one of their sparring sessions, not how they had been before his friend had sailed to the southern continent. Team Calorian forever. We haven't had any good Chaol Dorian moments in a hot second. And I miss them. I love this, that Dorian is like, what can I shift into? And he's like, I know, my bestie bro. I love it. I love it with my entire being. I can't wait for these two to reunite. And then he thinks to himself, had Chaol managed to be healed, had he and Nezrin convinced the Calgon to send aid, how would Chaol even learn where he was, what had happened to all of them, when they'd been scattered to the winds? He's like, how's Chaol gonna find me? Anyway, then we go back to shifting. Yrene continues to give instruction, and then Dorian is like, okay, I think I've got enough information. Thank you so much. He wraps his magic around her, and he feels her being, and he feels how she's Valg. Like, she has got that same evil Valg energy, and every inch of her magic is stolen magic. And Dorian studied her tiny frame, her ordinary face. You've been rather quiet regarding the quest for the revenge that sent you hunting across the continent. Yrene's dark eyes turned to depthless pits. Oh, I have not forgotten that. Not at all. And Yrene is like, I can make a bargain with you and make sure you are spared. Dorian doesn't even bother responding. He just strikes out with his magic and immediately kills her. He defined his way into Morinth. Once he mastered the shifting, and the spider and all her kind could burn in hell. He's like, oh, if I could shift, I can sneak into Morinth. Right now I'm like way too recognizable to get into Morinth. If I can shift into something, I could get inside significantly easier. But like, he's like, okay, now we're done with the spider. He like recognizes the spider for Valg. It's also connected into his daddy issues and officer. He then goes to the tents, and he's sharing with Manon, and Manon goes, 13 is an uneven number, she said by way of explanation. I've always had a tent to myself. Like, she's kind of, like, pretending. She's not actually. She's pretending she's annoyed that Dorian is in her tent with her. And Dorian says, sorry to ruin that for you. And then Manon smells him and is like, what did you do? And Dorian just returns her stare and says, you did what you needed to today. I did as well. And Manon's like, you killed that spider. No judgment in her face, just raw curiosity. And Dorian says she was a threat. Like, he knows that eventually that spider would have gone after Manon. Not acceptable. Because that's his girly. His girly. He's after her for now. And Manon's like, she could have killed you. He gave her half a smile. No, she couldn't have. And Manon goes, you have nothing to say about my own choices? Dorian, my friends are fighting and likely being killed in the north. We don't have time to spend weeks winning over the Crochans. No self-righteous speeches then, says Manon. Dorian, this is war. We are past that sort of thing. And then Manon and Dorian kind of go back and forth and discuss like how they might convince the Crochans to join them. They are clearly building up this trust with the Crochans, but like they still are gonna have to convince the Crochans to join them in this war. And Manon is like, maybe you could use some of your magic power to compel them to join us. Did you think of that? And Dorian's like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work. And Manon's like, ugh. Well, my training didn't really involve a lot of like diplomacy and persuasion, you know? Like I mostly was just about like murder men, retain power, you know, like that was mostly my schooling. And Dorian was like, okay, well mine was. I learned a lot about diplomacy. Here's the thing. You need to find the thing that you need to find the thing they need and use it to your advantage. I think you should go talk to Glennis in the morning. She seems very cool, TBH, and I think she might have some insight into like what these girlies need and then where we can go from there. And then they talk a little bit about Dorian's dad, and Manon's like, why do you still hate the human part of your dad? Like, he clearly was working so hard to like keep you safe and do the best he could while being possessed by a Valg demon. Like, it was clearly the Valg, not the human man who killed your healer. Like, he is not the one you should hold responsible. And Dorian is like, okay, here's the thing, Manon. If someone told you that your grandmother was secretly good, that she hadn't wanted to murder your parents and so many others that she had been forced to make you kill your own sister, would you find it so easy to believe? To forgive her? And Manon is like, okay, fair enough. Anyway, I'm tired of chatting. Actually, therapy time over. Let's make out. And so they do. And so they make out and then go to sleep. Dorian and Manon share blankets, but they do not snuggle. Manon makes that very clear. That's where Manon draws the line. They can sleep in the same bed, but not touching. No snuggling allowed. And before dawn, she leaves to go talk to Glennis. She leaves Dorian in the tent before dawn even breaks. And she thinks to herself, perhaps she should have brought Dorian. He certainly knew how to play these games, to think like a king. He'd killed the spider, like a blue-blooded witch, though. Not an ounce of mercy. It shouldn't have thrilled her the way it did. But Manon knew her pride would never recover, and she'd never again be able to call herself a witch if she'd let him do this task for her. And then Glennis is there, and she's like, wow, you wanted to talk to me before breakfast. This must be, like, urgent. You must get the sense of urgency from your father. And Manon is like, here we go. Let's just lay it out. What would it take for me to win the Crochans over, to convince them to join us in war? And Glennis says, only a Crochan queen may ignite the flame of war to summon every witch from her hearth. The arrival of the flame is a summons that not only a true Crochan queen may make. And Manon is like, so cool, because I am actually a Crochan queen, so I just actually need to go over that pit and like grab some flames. And Glennis is like, no, you have to be accepted as a Crochan queen first. Like, you may be won by blood, but you have not actually been accepted as a Crochan queen. It's not so fast, Manon girly. And Manon is like, oh, how do I do that? And Glennis is like, well, I don't know. But we are actually headed south to Elway because a threat has arisen. And Manon is like, to Elway? Like, Elway is pretty much a lost cause at this point. Like, they've really been taken over by Erewhon. Come north with us to Terrasen. And Glennis is like, no, we have already promised. We are headed south. That's where we will leave Dorian and the witches. Then we go to Aedion, and Aedion is meeting with Darrow. It is a full day's march from where they last battled, and the whole army is coming with them. He gets there, and Darrow immediately just kind of wants to chat about the battle. And then Aedion is like, okay, he like, chats about the battle a little bit. And then he's like, why the heck did we need to come out here so quickly? And Darrow was like, well, I wanted to talk about the battle with you. And Aedion's like, I could have written you a report. Sent it down in this way. Like, my men need rest and shelter. So, like, we got to do that. Like, that's actually priority number one since you're being annoying. And Darrow says, fine, we can continue this chat in the morning with all of the lords. Like, I would rather have all the lords there anyway. And Aedion thinks tomorrow he'll attend the meeting with Aelin in tow. So, Lysandra, Aelin, back on duty. So, Lysandra is back in Aelin mode. The next day, it is the meeting with the lords. Aelin and Ansel, Aelin being Lysandra as Aelin, stroll into this war tent full of a bunch of princes and lords, including Rowan's cousin, Prince Aedion. I could never pronounce his name. Prince Eddie. And Darrow says to Aelin, you weren't invited to this meeting. Because remember, Darrow refuses to recognize Aelin's status as queen. Or according to Darrow, this girlie is like essentially no one. And Aedion says, I invited her since she's technically fighting in the Bane. I made her my second in command. So Aedion's like, yeah, she is in this meeting as my second in command. And then Aelin is like, sorry to disappoint that I do actually have rights to be in this meeting. And they spend the whole meeting kind of like strategizing what they should do next. Darrow thinks they should move the troops into a defensive position in Orinth. And Ren is like, I don't think so, because if they bring the witch towers will immediately knock down the walls of Orinth. That's like not a great idea. And Darrow's like, okay, well, we don't actually know anything about the witch towers. We don't know they're true. The only thing we've heard is like a rumor from an enemy. And Aelin is like, no, an enemy turned ally. Manon did not lie. She's fought alongside us. One of the other lords is like, well, she fought alongside you guys against Maeve, but would she turn against her own kind, against other witches? And Aedion says, Manon Blackbeak turned on her own grandmother, the High Witch of the Blackbeak clan. I do not think the iron splinters we found in her gut were a lie. Like, Manon is going to be happy to fight against the witches. And Aelin is like, the witch towers are real. I am not going to waste my breath proving their existence, nor will I risk Orinth to their power. And Darrow says, okay, so you're going to go to the border then and protect the towns with your fire that you've so magnificently displayed so far. Like, actually, what have you done that has been helpful? And Ansel luckily cuts in and says, Erwan likes to play his little mind games to drum up fear. Let him wonder and worry why Aelin hasn't wielded hers yet. Contemplate if she's storing it up for something grand. I hope it'll be horrific. Ansel is able to kind of like spin this. Ansel doesn't know this is Lysandra, but Ansel is able to spin this in a way that Aelin not using her firepower is like a strategic move to make it seem like maybe she's up to something. You know, maybe she's plotting and planning. And Lysandra, Aelin is like, phew, because she doesn't have fire powers. She's just a shapeshifter. So she really does need a good excuse on why she hasn't used any yet. And they spend a long time going back and forth debating on whether to move the army. In the end, two of them, Sol and Ren, vote to move the army to the border, and the other four, Darrow, Sloane, Gunnar, and Ironone, vote to move the army to Orinth. And so 4 is bigger than 2, and so I need to move the armies to Orinth. And Darrow says, should our allies not wish to risk our plan, they may depart. We hold you to no oaths. And Lysandra cannot believe he just said that. Like, Aelin spent so much time putting in like every single connection she had made over her whole life as an assassin, rallying these allies. And now Darrow's like, if they don't want to stay, they don't have to. They can just leave. And Galen says to Aelin, poor allies we would make indeed if we abandoned our friends when our choices veered from our own. We promised our assistance in this war. Wendelin will not back from it. And then Prince Ediaimon, Rowan's cousin, says, I swore an oath to my cousin, your consort, we will stay. And Aelin says, you are all welcome here, all of you, for as long as you like. And then Lord Gunnar says, you are not authorized to make such invitations. And everyone just ignores him. Like, I'm sorry, she's like literally being like, please stay here, we will make sure everyone is fed and housed. They like need allies. They need allies. Why are these lords being like, no allies for you? Again, death to all men. Except Rowan. He can stay. Rowan and Dorian. Dorian. I guess Chaol, honestly. I feel like Chaol's doing well this book. Regardless, everyone ignores Lord Gunnar, and Ansel and the Silent Assassins also agreed to stay. Like, none of these allies have come this way just to go home. The meeting's over, and they're about to like kind of disperse when a messenger arrives, and he like walks into the tent, and Lysandra smells Valg on him, but before she can like do anything, the messenger says, this is a message from Erwan, and he unleashes a blast of black wind right at Lysandra Aelin. And chaos ensues. People have their swords up. Lysandra gets knocked down and gets like a slice in her arm, and the messenger says, run to your castles, but then he sniffs the air, and Lysandra knows he's about to blow her cover. And Lysandra's like, somebody kill this guy, and hoping nobody like asks or brings up questions about like why she isn't burning him up herself. Prince Eddie tries to kill him with his magic, but the messenger seems to be conveying a message back down his bond to Erwan, like he's like suffocating him like Rowan's able to do. And so Aedion steps in to try to like truncate that and chops his head off, because he realizes what that guy is about to do. And Nox, who is the one who brought the messenger in, was like, he didn't have a ring, he didn't have a collar, like there was no way for me to know. And Aedion says he didn't need one. So there's something about the Valg where they're able to now possess bodies without rings. A little bit later that day, Aedion and Lysandra are walking together, and they suspect that now Erwan knows that Aelin isn't with them. That Erwan now knows that a shapeshifter has taken the place of Aelin. And Lysandra's like, what do we do? And Aedion is like, first, we make sure there are no other messengers at the camp. So, like, let's actually check on that. That was actually really bad. So, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. And Lysandra's like, he knows what I am. He knows we don't have Aelin. And Aedion is like, yeah, he also knows we were headed to Orinth, so we're in double trouble. He, like, knows everything. And he continues, Erwan doesn't know why Aelin isn't here, though. Like, that's one thing we have to advantage. Maybe he might assume that she's up to some sneaking scheme. We know that Aelin loves a sneaky little scheme, you know? And Lysandra's like, yeah, he might suppose that, or he might just use us as an opportunity to attack us when we're at our weakest, when we don't have this massive power source with us. If we go to Orinth, it will be a slaughterhouse. And Aedion's like, okay, well, good thing we're not going to Orinth then. Sol and Ravi will take some of their men back to the coast to make sure we don't encounter any more attacks from the sea. They'll rendezvous with what's left of the Wendland fleet, while Galen and his soldiers stay with us. Then we will march as one army down to the border. Lysandra's like, we can't do that. The lords voted against it. And Aedion says, leave it to me. And then the next chapter starts like this. The Bane were loyal to none but Aelin Galathynius. So were the allies she'd gathered, and the forces of Ren Alsbrook and Ravi and Sol of Surya, and so apparently it was Nox Owen. And yet it was Lysandra, not Aedion, who made their flight possible. Yeah, obviously. Aedion's like, leave it to me, and then Lysandra actually arranges it. Okay. Lysandra's headed back to her tent when Nox approaches her. And Nox is like, oh, so Erewhon has figured out that you're not Aelin, right? And Aelin is like, what the heck are you even talking about? I am Aelin. I'm not Lysandra, I am Aelin Galathynius. Aelin Ashryver Whitethorn Galathynius, actually. And Nox is like, so you recognize me then? And Aelin's like, why would I recognize you? You're just one of Darrow's lackeys. And Nox is like, a decent attempt. But Celaena Sarthothian looked a little more amused when she cut men into ribbons. But your secret is safe with me. Aelin, Celaena, was a friend. Is still one, I hope. And then he explains that he competed with her in the Glass Castle, not knowing she was the Queen of Terrasen at the time, and she was the one who warned him to run. And he came back to Terrasen, and through like a chain of events, ended up working for Darrow. And so he asks, so who are you? And Lysandra says, Aelin. And Nox says, okay, fair enough. And Lysandra's like, okay, what's the price of your silence then? What do we need to do to like have you keep the secret to yourself? Or have you already told Darrow? And Nox is like, why would I tell him? I serve Terrasen and the Galathynius family. I always have. I realized today the assassin I came to call a friend is actually a queen I believe's dead. I think the gods are pointing me in a certain direction. Don't you? And Lysandra decides she trusts this man. She's like, has gotten good instincts for it over the years. Over the years, she's able to like hone her instincts quite well. As her time as a courtesan. And she says to him, will you help us tonight at the risk of branding yourself a traitor? And Nox says, I owe my friend Celaena a favor for saving my life. And then Lysandra says, okay, listen carefully. So that night, Nox laces the wine he served the lords Darrow, Sloane, Gunnar, and Ironwood to make them sleep really hard. Like, they passed the heck out that night. You could not wake them, sleeping like the dead. And so in the morning, when they awoke the next day, there was only whipping snow beyond their tents. The camp was gone, and the army with it. Meanwhile, Yrene and Chaol arrive in Anielle, and Yrene immediately recognizes it from Chaol's memories. She spent so much time in there in Tower of Dawn, just like in his memories, digging around of these early days in Anielle, and it like looks just like he remembers it. And they go to the keep, and Chaol's like, hello, I would like to see my dad. And Yrene is like nervous, and Chaol is just like holding her hand and comforting her, and I'm just like literally so obsessed with them. I like really feel like they work so well together. Chaol needed someone that he could like reassure by holding her hand. Like Aelin was never going to be the girl that he could provide that like comfort to, and I think he wanted someone that he could take care of. And like I think Yrene also takes care of him in a way. Like they really do take care of each other, and I just like think it's sweet, and I just think they work so well together. But Yrene is thinking about that memory of Chaol's, where Chaol's father is chucking him out of the castle on the steps, this like child version of Chaol. And she's just like not super excited to meet Chaol's daddy because he seems kind of like the worst. They get invited inside, and Chaol thinks to himself. Chaol had never been ashamed of this keep until he'd walked through it with Yrene, had never realized how badly it needed repairs, how neglected it had been. The thought of her, so full of light and warmth in this bleak place, made him want to run back to the Rook, waiting on the parapets, and fly to the coast again. Lord Westfall doesn't even bother to stand up as they arrive, and he says, hey, Chaol, you walk. Last I heard, you couldn't even wiggle your toes, so great news. It is thanks to this woman, Chaol said. Yet Yrene stared at his father with a coldness Chaol has never glimpsed before, as if she were thinking of rotting his organs from the inside out. It warmed Chaol enough to say, my wife, Lady Yrene Towers Westfall. And Lord Westfall is like, a healer. Interesting. Towers is not a noble last name. And Yrene says, it is not, but it is a lineage no less proud or worthy. She's like, I'm a Towers and I'm proud of it. And Lord Westfall is like, well, honestly, better than that assassin. Although, Now that I come to think of it, that assassin turned out to be the Queen of Terrasen. So you actually would have really married up if you had stuck with her. If you had held on to her, actually probably would have been better. And Chaol says, Yrene is the finest healer of her generation. Her worth is greater than any crown. And Yrene turns to Chaol and says, don't even bother trying to prove my value to him. I do not care what he thinks of me. I think he's scum on the bottom of my shoe. So like, why would I care what he thinks of me at all? You know? I know precisely how talented I am. I do not require his blessing. And Chaol's like, hey, sorry about the fact that I like broke that oath that I made to you. I like really do feel bad about that. I normally am not an oath breaker, but like, you know, tough times, you gotta do what you gotta do. I came here to warn you. And Lord Westfall is like, I know, Morinth is on the move. I already moved your mother and brother to the mountains for safety. And Chaol is like, so they're not like, just like on the move. They are sending 10,000 men here right now. Prepare the city. And Lord Westfall is like, we cannot stand against 10,000 troops. We do not have enough men to even make a dent in that. And Chaol says, okay, well then evacuate everyone you can and prepare for a siege. And Lord Westfall says, last I looked, boy, I was still Lord of Anielle. You gladly turned your back on it, twice. Have you come back to bleed for Anielle then? To bleed at last for this city? And Yrene is like, hey, you do not talk to my husband like that, Yrene said with a dangerous calm. His father ignored her, but Yrene stepped up to Chaol's side. I am the heir apparent to the healer on high of the Torsesme. I came at your son's behest back to the lands of my birth to help with this war, along with 200 healers from the Tor itself. Your son spent the last several months forging an alliance with the Covenant, and now all of the Khaghan's armies sail to this continent to save your people. So while you sit here in your miserable keep, tossing insults at him, know that he has done what no other could do. And if your city survives, it will be because of him, not you. And then it comes out that, like, Chaol's dad has kind of known the whole time that, not, like, fully, but has been, like, suspicious of the Valg, has known the king was, like, up to something and is suspicious. Like, again, he doesn't know the whole story. He doesn't know exactly what had happened, but he, like, knew that something was going on with the way that the king was, like, raising a military force. That's why he wanted Chaol here. That's why he tried to recall Chaol back to Anielle, because he knew he would need, like, a strong son to defend Anielle, because Chaol's little brother, cutie patootie, but like he's a scholar, you know, he's not here for the fighting. And Chaol's like, okay, well, if we don't have enough men to defend the palace, like we're trying to send for the Southern Continent army, like they won't be here for like a week. So maybe we can recruit the White Fang men to help us. Let Erewhon unite us at last. And they have always been at war with the White Fang men, the wild men of the mountains that live right behind Anielle. And Chaol's father is like really reluctant to like call on them because like they are enemies. And he says, and offer them what? The mountains have belonged to us since before Gavin Havillard sat on that throne. And Yrene muttered, offer them the damn moon if it will convince them to help. Like, I don't care what you offer them. Give them something. Otherwise we're all dead. And Lord Westfall says, I will not give up the White Fangs. I would rather die. And Irene's like, okay, well, I hope your people agree with that sentiment. His father let out one of those joyless laughs. I like you better than the Assassin Queen, I think. Perhaps marrying the rabble will breed some backbone into our bloodline once more. Chaol's blood roared in his ears, but Irene's lips curved into a smile. You're exactly as I'd picture you'd be, she said. His father only inclined his head. Prepare the city, this keep, Chaol managed to say through gritted teeth, or you'll deserve everything you bring down upon it. And then they are sent to a small guest room for the evening, and they're alone at last, and Yrene is like, wow, he's like worse than you even portrayed him. And Chaol is like, you were just like so brilliant and amazing out there. Essentially his father has agreed to the evacuations, but they didn't like stick around to help with the planning. Like they needed to rest, and also Chaol's dad like really grates on them. And Chaol's like, sorry he talked to you that way. Like, that was really inappropriate. I, like, really apologize for that. And Yrene is like, I'm sorry you had to deal with him for longer than that conversation. And we learn that Anielle is actually, like, a pretty rich city. Probably because Daddy Westfall isn't wasting all of his money on renovations. Like, turning the castle glass. You know, like, he's out here, like, being thrifty. We have to kind of respect that. Yrene is like, I don't know, maybe we should have brought more healers. They're only sending 50 with this group that's coming to defend Anielle. And as Chaol is like, you know what, we will make do with what we have. Like, 50 healers is more than we would have had yesterday. Like, I think you are probably the first magically inclined healer we had in the city. So, like, we will be grateful for what we have. The people are evacuating through the mountains, but it is really dangerous, and there will probably be a lot of casualties. And Yrene is like, okay, well, if people want to stay, maybe we can have them stay in the castle. We can have them stay with us in the castle, and they can help us essentially turn this place into a hospital. He nodded, pride filling his chest to the point of pain. A lady. If not by blood, then by nobility of character. His wife was more of a lady than any other he'd met in any court. Then let us prepare for war, husband, Yrene said, sorrow and dread filling her eyes. And it was at the sight of that kernel of fear, not for herself, but what they were undoubtedly soon to take part in, to witness, that had him sweeping her into his arms and laying her upon the bed. War can wait till morning, he said, and lowered his mouth to hers. I would simply die for the Westfall Towers. I love them so much. I think they're so beautiful. I think they just like needed each other. They're like puzzle pieces fitting into place. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. I think Yrene makes Chaol better. And I think Chaol makes Yrene probably the same. Yrene is like pretty cool by herself, but maybe a little better. Maybe a little like braver. He like pushes her into the world a little bit. Makes her feel safe enough to pursue all of that. Although like she crossed the mountains and the seas by herself. Let us never forget. The next morning, dawn breaks and the rooks arrive, which freaks out the common people, which like obviously like makes sense because they did not know that like 50 giant birds, well, 50, I think more than that. I don't think they knew that several hundred giant birds were like scheduled to arrive, and that would be scary if you were just like minding your own business. You looked up into the sky and there were birds the size of like horses just flying through your town. I do think you would be freaked out. And so they land and they wind up settling on this field on one side of the keep. It had once been part of the lake itself, before the western falls, tucked into the fangs, had been dammed up, their roaring waters quieted to a trickle that fed into the lake. The destruction breaking that dam would cause, even if they gathered every water wielder in the realm to control the flow, would be catastrophic. The entire plain would flood in a matter of minutes, some of the city being swept away as well. The water would barrel down from the mountains, destroying everything in their path in a mighty wave that would flow into Oakwald itself. The lowest levels of that keep, the gate would open onto the plain, would be wholly submerged, so the dam had stayed and the grassy plain with it. Gee, I really hope nothing happens to that dam. That would be bad. Anyway, they're all in this grassy field. We are finally reunited with Sartaq and Nezrin. They are here to help battle, and Chaol and Yrene are down there chatting with them. Nezrin explains that Morinth is about 3 or 4 days away, but like coming soon. And Sartaq is like, Falcon was able to get closer. It's a mix of men and Valg, but like they're clearly like fast and vicious, but we have no indication that they have witches or witch towers yet. So we still are just dealing with mostly ground forces. So that's good because we have birds. So could work out well for us. All right, that's where we're gonna leave all of our girlies for now. That'll be the end of video 1. I feel like we're just getting set up. This was a lot of setup, a lot of build up. This was the first like 20 chapters. I think we're going to do this in like 20-ish chapter chunks, which means we're going to have probably about 5 videos, but that's okay. Like at this point, you're not watching for a recap because what are we recapping for? You're just here to like have a little chit chat about these books, I assume. That's why I make you them, because I just want to chit chat about them. I will talk to you in the next video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Obviously, you need to be along for the journey, for the ride. We'll see you in the next one. Okay, bye.